Chapter 426, Weapon Refining Master. In front of the long table, the little girl was moving her feet as she carefully observed the row of heavenly-grade armaments. Her eyes were shining, and she was drooling in envy. Behind the little girl, Zhao Butian also followed suit. His big eyes would look at his weapon and then at Feng Ming. Ho! Suddenly, a whistling sound pierced through the air, and then, with a dang sound, a weapon appeared on the long table. What Tang Huan had just forged was a thick and heavy long blade. The style of the blade was similar to the unfamiliar saber from ancient times. The saber was 2 meters long. The saber's body had a brilliant gold color, and in the middle of the dazzling gold, there were green, red and yellow mixed together. Another one. So fast. The little girl jumped up, grabbed the saber in her hand and started waving it. Although she could not activate the heavenly-grade armament, it was still filled with an extremely sharp chi. After a long while, she returned the weapon to the wooden table and sighed in admiration. Good blade. Even if it was a saint rank weapon, it was probably only so-so. Bluo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King. http://www.bikes.com/0_48/ In 8 days, 78 heavenly-grade armament. There were still 20 of the Star Ocean Commerce's ingredients remaining, and he could forge another 20 heavenly-grade armament. The Spirit Feather Merchant Guild had a total of 42 sets of materials, which were enough to forge 42 heavenly-grade armament. Sigh. I lost. The little girl shook her head and kept sighing. The Star Ocean Commerce and the Spirit Feather Merchant Guild managed to obtain so many high-quality heavenly-grade armament. If we were to take them all out, not only would the 2 merchant guilds be able to get back their capital, they would also be able to earn billions more. Yeah? Zhao Butian tilted his head and blinked his dark blue eyes suspiciously. It's all your fault. The little girl snappily knocked on its head. Time flowed like water. Tang Huan's heart had never been distracted, but the number of heavenly-grade armament on the long table had increased one by one. Clang! With a wave of his arm, another set of heavenly-grade armament landed on the table. Tang Huan exhaled lightly and grabbed another heavy set of iron ore. But before he made his move, Tang Huan seemed to have sensed something. He looked towards the hall's door in the blink of an eye. Creak! It was Peng Bo. Peng Bo couldn't help but take in a cold breath as his eyes quickly swept across the room. His face was completely lifeless as his mouth grew wider and his eyeballs became rounder and rounder. Brother Peng? A voice entered his ears. Peng Bo looked up in shock and realized that Tang Huan was already standing in front of him with a smile on his face, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He couldn't help but gulp down a mouthful of saliva and say, Brother Tang Huan, all these heavenly-grade armament were forged by you these past few days? He knew very well that he had asked a useless question. When Tang Huan entered the Wonder Artifact Hall, there was not a single heavenly-grade armament here. In the past few days, the Wonder Artifact Hall had never been opened, and there was no second weapon refiner inside. At this moment, as he entered the hall, the numerous heavenly-grade armament he saw were all undoubtedly forged by Tang Huan. It was precisely because he understood this that he couldn't help but ask. At this moment, the shock in his heart could not be described with words. How could a person forge a heavenly-grade armament at such a speed? Last year, before Tang Huan entered the Sky Spirit Realm, in a few days, he refined 38 high-grade weapons, and sold them to the Star Ocean Commerce for a high price of $1 billion. The speed at which he forged and the quality of the weapons he forged shook the entire heavenly forging city and also caused Peng Bo to be at a loss for words. Thinking back, it would be very difficult for Tang Huan to regain the speed he once displayed. After all, Tang Huan had just come out of the Sky Spirit Realm. He had never forged any heavenly-grade armament before, so he had to start all over again. Perhaps, it would take a few days to successfully forge the first heavenly-grade armament. It was even possible that Tang Huan would not be able to forge a single heavenly-grade armament during these 10 days. There were hundreds of weapon refiner with the strength of the 8th stage of Glory Continent, but only 10% of them were weapon refining master. The rest were high-ranked weapon refiner. It could be seen that it was not an easy thing to advance from a high-ranking weapon refiner to weapon refining master. It was not strange for Tang Hua to be obstructed at the moment, but now, Pang Bo realized that he had still greatly underestimated Tang Huan. Exactly. Tang Huan followed Pang Bo's gaze and looked over, then retracted his gaze and smiled. Brother Pang, is there something important that you're looking for me for? It is indeed an important matter. Pang Bo couldn't help but take a deep breath after he regained his senses. Brother Tang Huan, tomorrow is the 1st of June. So fast? Tang Huan was a little surprised. In this period of time, he had been completely focused on forging heavenly grade armament, and he really didn't care how many days had passed. Nor did he count how many heavenly grade armament he had forged here. He didn't expect that tomorrow would be the day the weapon refining sacred assembly was held. After a slight pause, Tang Huan asked again, Brother Pang, where are we going to undergo the weapon refining master's promotions examination? Brother Tang Huan, you managed to forge nearly 100 heavenly grade armament in 10 days. There's no need to take the examination. Pang Bo couldn't help but laugh. You can go straight to the 3rd floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion to find the Great Elder. He's waiting for you there. The identity token of the weapon refining master is already prepared for you. Alright, I will go to Divine Weapon Pavilion now. Tang Huan also laughed. Brother Pang, can you help me send all these heavenly grade armament to the Star Ocean Commerce? He just realized that he had used up all the materials provided by the Star Ocean Commerce. Sure, no problem. When Tang Huan left the Divine Weapon Pavilion with Zhao Budian and the little girl, the high-ranking weapon refiner's identity badge had already been changed to the weapon refining master. At this time, the heavenly forging city was already completely shrouded in darkness. On the 1st floor of the Southern Star Ocean Weapon Shop, and the others who had just arrived and the surrounding customers were all dumbstruck as they looked at the table full of heavenly grade armament. Even Xing Yan was shocked. She had originally thought that of the 104 sets of ingredients, Tang Huan being able to successfully forge 70 heavenly grade armament was already an incredible feat. He never expected that the number of heavenly grade armament that Tang Huan would bring back would be as many as 98. Moreover, it only took Tang Huan 10 days to forge all these weapons. To think that the speed and success rate of a heavenly grade armament being forged would reach such a level, this was simply shocking. These heavenly grade armament seemed to have been personally sent here by Divine Weapon Pavilion's Pang Bo. Could it be that Star Ocean Commerce invited this Divine Weapon Pavilion to forge them? Didn't you hear what Pang Bo said? These heavenly grade armament were given to him by Tang Huan. Which Tang Huan? You are truly ill-informed. Even Tang Huan doesn't know about this. Tang Huan just came out of the spirit realm 10 days ago. And now he's giving us 98 heavenly grade armament. Could it be that he used these 10 days to forge all these weapons? After a moment of silence, cries of alarm arose from the surroundings. Chapter 427, The Holy Meeting. 10 days, 98 heavenly grade armaments? Within the Spirit Feather Merchant Guild, within an exquisite hall, Wang Ting was so shocked that she jumped up. She looked in disbelief at the black-robed middle-aged man in front of her. The two great organizations were not far from each other, and with regards to the movements in the Star Ocean Commerce, the Spirit Feather Merchant Guild was extremely concerned. Before the news of Pang Bo personally driving a large number of heavenly grade armament into the Star Ocean Weapon Shop had spread throughout the city, it had already reached her. Are you sure there are this many? Wang Ting calmed herself down and said incredulously, General Director, I've personally counted 98 items. The black-clothed middle-aged man nodded, and said resolutely, these weapons were all forged by Tang Huan in these 10 days. Xing Yan found a few martial lords of the 8th step to test out some weapons. As he finished speaking, the black-clothed middle-aged man's eyes couldn't help but reveal an expression of surprise. This Tang Huan, seriously, what a monster. The heavenly grade armament that is being forged right now has the power of a holy ranked weapon. Once he becomes the weapon refining Grand Master, the holy ranked weapon he forges will be infinitely close to the divine armament. Does this mean that if he were to successfully forge a divine armament one day, Wouldn't his power be even greater than the ones forged by the sacred Emperor's mountain and river sect's divine armament? The black-clothed middle-aged man couldn't help but ask. What? Tang Huan is already a weapon refining master. In a courtyard within the Four Seas Academy, Kuij found it hard to believe his ears as he stared at the tall and skinny old man in front of him. The tall and skinny old man said, "Young master, it is really the news from the Star Ocean Commerce. It is completely true." So it turns out that Tang Huan had been forging heavenly-grade armament in Wonder Artifact Hall for the past few days. Not long ago, Divine Weapon Pavilion's Peng Bo had sent all the weapons he had forged to Star Ocean Commerce. 10 days? How many heavenly-grade armament he forged? Kuij frowned. 98 pieces. The tall and skinny old man smiled bitterly. 98. Kuij took a deep breath and sat down on a stone bench. His face twitched and his eyes stared straight ahead. Weapon Refining Master. Weapon Refining Master. In the courtyard of the Four Seas Academy, Meng Zan also laughed bitterly and sighed. How can we, a group of us, compete with one another in a single weapon refining master? It's fine if Tang Huan doesn't participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly, but if he does, the chief of the sacred assembly will definitely be him. Does this Tang Huan really not know how he cultivates? A young man at the side said in a muffled voice, "It's the Nirvana sacred fire and the sun spirit body." It's said that he obtained the spirit seed from the Wofu world of the heavens spirit realm, and is now a peak 8th stage martial lord and weapon refining master at the age of 18. He can probably become a stage 9 martial saint by the age of 20. First there's Yufian, then there's Tang Huan, and finally there's this Shen Shan. Could this be a clear indication that our human clan will soon reappear in the glorious era 100 years ago? He really became a weapon refining master. Bluo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King. http://www.bikes.com/0_48/ In a pavilion east of Heavenly Forging City, Tang Yun pouted with a grunt, then pinched her round and delicate chin, her beautiful eyes roaming about, thinking about something unknown. After a long while, Tang Yun suddenly waved her fair arms, and her eyes flashed with excitement. Let's do it. The difference between us is really getting bigger and bigger. In the depths of the Wu family manor, Wu Yixian, who had just returned home a few days ago, could not help but sigh. The news that spread out from the Star Ocean weapon shop quickly spread like a storm, and before long, the entire Heavenly Forging City was once again stirred. This night in Heavenly Forging City was also destined to be a sleepless night. In the early morning of the next day, almost at the first light of dawn, there were people beginning to gather in the direction of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. At this time, there were already many people bustling about the wide plaza in front of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared, the sacred assembly had already been set up. When Tang Huan brought the little girl and Zhao Budian outside the Divine Weapon Pavilion, the plaza was already filled with a sea of people, and even the roofs of the nearby houses were already filled. Tang Huan did not stay outside and directly walked into the Divine Weapon Pavilion. On the first level of Divine Weapon Pavilion, a large number of figures were also gathered there. From the aura fluctuations that leaked out from these people, Tang Huan knew that they were all weapon refiners waiting to participate in the weapon refining sacred assemblies. There were actually as many as 1,000 of them, and they were all young men and women. Everyone gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, constantly muttering and clamoring. There was a little girl who looked like she was carved from jade following Tang Huan, causing him to immediately attract the attention of many weapon refiner. Fortunately, he had considered that there would be a lot of martial warriors around today, so he intentionally placed Zhao Budian in his pocket when he was about to leave. Otherwise, he would have already become the focus of attention outside. Who is this person? And why is he bringing a little girl? That little girl is so cute. Is she his daughter? This is the first time I've seen someone bring their daughter to participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly. Within the crowd, sounds of surprised mutters immediately rang out, and quite a few weapon refiners could not help but laugh. In the Glory Continent, there were many 20-year-old weapon refiner who were parents, but those who brought their children to participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly were people they had never seen before. "I'm not his daughter, I'm his sister." Hearing the noises from time to time, the little girl was so angry that her face turned green. She waved her two little fists and roared while baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. Although being Tang Huan's sister was very unpleasant, it was still better than being treated as Tang Huan's daughter. However, not only did her furious appearance not intimidate anyone, it instead made her seem even cuter. Immediately, more laughter sounded from the crowd. "Tang Huan!" Right at this moment, a tender cry suddenly sounded out, and immediately after, a beautiful young lady in a white dress appeared in front of Tang Huan. Right at this moment, a tender cry suddenly rang out, and immediately after, a beautiful young lady in a white dress appeared in front of Tang Huan. However, compared to this beautiful baby-faced girl, the most eye-catching person was the young man with the little girl whom she had stopped. "Tang Huan? Did I hear wrongly?" She called him Tang Huan. "He is that Tang Huan who forges 98 heavenly grade armament in 10 days? TSK, it really is Tang Huan. The last time I saw him, he was still at Furious Waves City's weapon refining sacred assembly apostrophe. At that time, he was not much stronger than me, but in just a short span of 2 years, he was already a weapon refining master, while I am still just a mediator now." Chapter 428, the last one. In the vast space on the first floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion, cries of alarm suddenly sounded. Thousands of gazes practically fell on Tang Huan at the same time, as if his entire person was about to be penetrated. Tang Huan. This was definitely the most resounding name for the Glory Continent in recent years. Even after Tang Huan had entered the Sky Spirit secret realm, the news regarding him continued to be transmitted out and spread across the entire continent. After entering the secret realm, he had immediately rushed to the top 20 ranks of the heavenly ranking. First, with the Stage 7 Martial Master's cultivation, he had become the Martial Lords Yan Zhangkong and Yang Dong, who were both at the 8th step of the spirit ranking. Then he entered the Wofu world and ascended the 72nd step of the heaven stairway. After that, Tang Huan killed the young master of the demon clan, Fen Lei, and then crossed the sky stairway to enter the extreme spirit palace. All of the martial warriors talked excitedly about Tang Huan's achievements, especially last night, when Tang Huan had actually done another huge thing that countless people were interested in. In 10 days, he had successfully forged close to 100 heavenly grade armament. This was definitely something that no one had ever forged before or after. Even the sacred emperor from 100 years ago would not be able to accomplish something like this. Regardless of whether they acknowledged it or not, this guy who was rising like a comet became the target of admiration for the countless youths and children in the Glory Continent. "So you're your highness of a princess." Under everyone's watch, Tang Huan revealed a smile, and bowed to the young lady in white, her eyes revealing a trace of surprise. This young lady in the white dress was the little princess of the great Tang Empire, Tang Yun, whom he had arranged to battle on top of the weapon refining competition. In the 2 years that they had not met, she had changed even more than Goof. "Don't call me Princess, Your Highness, just call me Tang Yun." Tang Yun squinted his eyes and laughed. "Tang Huan, do you still remember our agreement?" "Of course I do." Tang Huan laughed, feeling a headache. "You are already a weapon refining master and I am only a high-ranking weapon refiner. There is no need to compete to know the result," Tang Yun said in a very depressed manner with a bitter face. Tang Huan was about to console her, but the dejected look on Tang Yun's face suddenly disappeared, and unexpectedly became spirited again. He waved his fist a few times, as though he was encouraging himself. "However, I won't admit defeat so easily. Tang Huan, I will definitely see you again." "Huh?" Tang Huan was startled, but before he could speak, Tang Yun had already ran away happily. Her last words made Tang Huan somewhat suspicious, but after a slight thought, he did not think any more, and under everyone's attentive gaze, He quickly passed through the crowd and headed towards the second floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion. Not long later, Tang Huan's figure disappeared from everyone's sight. His actions left everyone bewildered. Luo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King http://www.bikes.com/0_48/ Previous chapter, Table of Contents. However, before the crowd could react, Bang Bo had already appeared at the entrance, following which, a loud voice rang out, "Everyone, please enter the stage." The crowd filed out and followed the isolated passageway into the square. At this time, the center area of the plaza had already been neatly arranged with many low jade tables and prayer mats. Everyone walked to the table in succession and sat down. As time passed by, more and more martial warriors gathered around and more of them also entered the plaza from the passage. However, many of the weapon refineresses that were sitting cross-legged on the prayer mat would occasionally glance towards the Divine Weapon Pavilion's door. Until now, Tang Huan had still not come out. It seems like there is only one table left, and that should be Tang Huan's table? No. The last table was just taken. The positions here are all based on the number of people who have signed up, and all of them have been occupied. Don't tell me Tang Huan isn't going to participate in this weapon refining sacred assembly apostrophe. Was already a weapon refining master and his tools method attainments far surpassed everyone else's. If he were to participate, then there would be no suspense for the position of the champion. To Tang Huan, this was meaningless. Like Yufian, she did not participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly as well. Looks like Tang Huan won't participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly. Without Tang Huan, the fight for the position of chief of the sacred assembly would have been very intense. However, the chief of the sacred assembly would have been me in the end. Great. Almost at the same time, in another corner of the venue, Meng Zhen could not help but clap his hands and laugh. He heaved a sigh of relief as his tensed face relaxed. Since he is not participating in the weapon refining sacred assembly, then why is he still running to the Divine Weapon Pavilion? In the center of the venue, a sturdy man could not help but mutter, "He shouldn't be going to be the referee for this sacred assembly, right?" Wu Yixian, who was next to the burly man and was as beautiful as a woman, jokingly said, "How is this possible?" The stocky man didn't even think before he shook his head. A few meters in front of Wu Yixian and the muscular man, a beautiful woman in red tightly pursed her lips to prevent herself from laughing. However, her blade-like shoulders kept shaking, causing the surrounding weapon refineress to look surprised. For the weapon refiner who had the power to become the champion, it was indeed a good thing if Tang Huan didn't participate in the weapon refining sacred assembly, but there was no need to be this happy, right? It's here. At this moment, there was a sudden burst of loud shouting from outside the venue. The noise was earth-shaking. The many weapon refineress subconsciously looked over, and saw many figures walking out from the Divine Weapon Pavilion, with Great Clan Elder Shen Guan at the front. Generally speaking, every time there was a weapon refining sacred assembly, there would be a weapon refining Grand Master and 9 weapon refining Master S. Great Clan Elder Shen Guan was a Stage 9 martial saint, so naturally, those following behind him were all weapon refining master. Almost all of the weapon refining masters were famous figures, and every time one of them appeared, they would be recognized. Gu Yi, Wu Zin. Ni Wuji, King Yi. 8 weapon refining master had come out. There was still one more. Everyone looked at the figure of a slender figure that walked out from behind King Yi. It was a young man dressed in black robes with a handsome face. The moment they saw him, the entire venue immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, unable to believe their eyes. The last judge of this time's weapon refining sacred assembly was actually him. Chapter 429. It's your time to go on stage. Tang Huan. That person was actually Tang Huan. Originally, when everyone saw that all the seats were occupied, they thought that Tang Huan would not participate in this time's weapon refining sacred assembly. In the end, everyone's guess was wrong. Tang Huan still participated in the weapon refining sacred assembly. However, He did not participate as a competitor, but as a referee. Unknowingly, Tang Huan had already reached a position that everyone had to look up to. However, with Tang Huan's tools method attainments, he was more than enough to be the referee for the Sacred Assembly. For a time, many people had complex expressions on their faces within the Sacred Assembly. After a brief period of silence, the surrounding area erupted into an even more deafening clamor. I thought that Tang Huan wouldn't be participating in the weapon refining Sacred Assembly, but I didn't think that not only would he be participating, he would even become the referee. The weapon refining Sacred Assembly has been holding this competition for so many years, but this is the first time that a referee of such a young age has appeared. TSK, a referee that isn't even 20 years old. Tang Huan is indeed powerful, but compared to Yufian, he's still lacking a little. Allegedly, she was already a stage 9 martial saint, a weapon refining grandmaster. It's a pity that she left Heavenly Forging City as soon as she came out of the Heaven Spirit Secret Realm. If not, the main judge for this gathering would not be Great Elder Shen, but her. Amidst the clamoring noise, Tang Huan followed Shen Guan and the others and sat down on a high platform set up on the north side of the plaza. This was the second time Tang Huan had participated in a gathering of this kind of weapon refiner in more than 2 years. One was Furious Waves City's weapon refining competition, the other was this weapon refining Sacred Assembly. Last time, they were just competitors, but this time they were the referees. The change in cultivation, the increase in tools method attainments, and his identity had also caused Tang Huan to feel completely different from before. Everyone. Shen Guan's loud and mighty voice had already echoed throughout the world. He didn't speak too much, and after a few simple opening words, he returned to his seat. However, his voice seemed to contain an inspiring strength. Tang Huan, it's your turn. King Yi smiled and looked at Tang Huan. Aside from the referee Shen Guan, the rest of the weapon refining masters that acted as referees, there were actually 3 people that Tang Huan recognized. One was Gu Yi, one was Wu Xin, and the other was King Yi. Tang Huan took a deep breath, he then calmed himself down and nodded towards Shen Guan and the rest, then stood up and walked to the front of the stage. Everyone, this time's weapon refining Sacred Assembly apostrophe, a total of 4 rounds. Tang Huan had a light smile on his face, his tone was clear and gentle, but it was extremely penetrating. After he slowly explained the situation regarding the weapon refining Sacred Assembly, Tang Huan could not help but feel that this Sacred Assembly was indeed worthy of being called the most elite competition that targeted the young weapon refiner of Glory Continent. No matter if it was the competition's specifications or the competition's rewards, they were both not something that the weapon refining competition could compare to. Luo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King http://www.bikes.com/0_48/ Previous chapter. Table of Contents. The Sacred Assembly was one more round than the weapon refining competition. The first round was about weapon refiners' attainments in the area of Spirit Map. The second round was about weapon refiners' ability to control fire. The third round was about weapon refiners' comprehension in terms of tools method, and the fourth round was about weapon refiners' overall strength. The reward for passing the first round was a precious iron ore and 2 high-ranked gems. For passing the second round, he would receive 5 high-ranked gems, and the reward for passing the third round would be 2 heaven-ranked gems. As for passing the fourth round, he would receive 5 heaven-ranked gems, the first 3 gems, and the rest of the saint-grade gem. The prizes from the first few rounds were not bad, but the prizes from the top 3 were a little shocking. Even if it was the Divine Weapon Pavilion S, they would only have a limited number of saint-grade gem, but this time, they took out 3 of them. Get on the Spirit Map. Following Tang Huan's loud shout, a group of young men and women entered one after another, holding trays. Not long after, a thin jade slip about a foot long and a foot wide appeared on the table in front of everyone. If he were to find the correct spirit map within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he would be able to pass. Everyone, begin. Tang Huan growled again. In the auction, No matter what those weapon refiners thought about Tang Huan, they could only restrain their emotions and quickly make their move. Tang Huan smiled and returned to his seat. When he was at the second floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion, he had tried out the spirit maps that were used for the entrance exams. They were not considered very complicated, but they had been drawn in extremely tricky ways, requiring extreme care. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have been able to pass within the time it took for an incense stick to burn. In the auction, many weapon refiner had obviously noticed this and could not help but frown. The atmosphere became tense in an instant. Around the venue, the onlookers seemed to be infected as the earth-shaking noise died down a lot. On the other hand, on the stage, everyone still maintained a relaxed expression, occasionally smiling and watching the weapon refiner below make some comments. However, when their eyes swept past Tang Huan, they could still see the lingering shock in everyone's eyes. Forget about the shock that Tang Huan gave to everyone last night. Just his performance on the second floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion shocked everyone once again. A weapon refining master called Ni Wuji jokingly wanted to test Tang Huan's attainments with the spirit map. Hence, he got someone to bring out a pile of jade plates that were used by everyone. In the end, not even half an incense worth of time had passed before Tang Huan found all the correct spirit map from the pile of jade plates. That was not a dozen or 20 jade plates, but 100. At that time, Ni Wuji and the others were completely shocked. It was only then that they found out how Tang Huan was able to obtain all the sword seal from the Mazi Sword Valley. In next to no time, an incense stick's worth of time had passed. Wailing sounds came from the audience. It was clear whether or not the first round of the sacred assembly was passed at a glance. If a spirit map was successfully found and activated, that jade piece would immediately release a brilliant luster, and even if the first round of exams ended, the luster would not disappear. From beginning to end, the jade slip in front of him had always been dim and dull. Naturally, he would be eliminated. Many people left dejectedly. Not long after, almost half of the sacred assembly was empty. Those that were eliminated were all middle-stage weapon refiner. It's your turn again. King Yi smiled and raised her eyebrows at Tang Huan. Tang Huan laughed helplessly, and walked to the front of the stage once again. At this time, a jade table had already been placed there. On the table, there were sparkling and translucent black beads. Each bead was only the size of a thumb. Everyone, this is the content of the second round of the examination. Chapter 430, Fire Line Piercing Beads. Tang Huan's voice was like a bell ringing, immediately attracting everyone's attention, and the black beads on the table stacked up. They could be seen clearly in the audience. Hearing his words, everyone's curiosity was piqued. This round is called Fire Thread Piercing Bead. The test is on your ability to control fire. 2 pairs of eyes quickly swept across the place. Tang Huan smiled lightly. Immediately after, with a thought from Tang Huan, a small ball of flame appeared in his right palm. Under the gazes of countless people outside the auction site, the flame in Tang Huan's palm continued to shrink until it became a long red filament. It was nearly a meter in length, and its head and tail were extremely evenly matched. Everyone immediately understood what fire thread piercing beads meant, and inside and outside the venue, a collective gasp could be heard. This Tang Huan's ability to control fire is too terrifying. To be able to condense fire to such a degree? Damn. This is too difficult. I'm finished. I'll definitely be eliminated in this round. I wonder how many beads will be needed to pass this round? I estimate that it will only be able to string 9 beads at most, if I add more. Shouts and curses rang out from time to time. Some of the weapon refiner in the venue had extremely ugly expressions. This kind of test was extremely difficult. On the high platform, Tang Huan's expression did not change as he slowly picked up a black pearl and tied it to the thread formed by the flames. The hole in the middle of the bead was only as big as a grain of rice. The flame threads that were formed had to be smaller than the hole in order to enter. In the blink of an eye, the bead fell to the bottom. Tang Huan then picked up the second bead and the third bead. Tang Huan's speed was extremely fast. In just a short span of a dozen breaths of time, all the beads on the table had been linked. and there were already 49 of them. Under countless gazes, Tang Huan turned his right palm to the side, and that originally rising flame thread immediately floated horizontally in the air. The threads were actually as hard as iron. None of the 49 pearls that were connected by the flame fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, not only were the weapon refineress and martial warriors' faces filled with shock, even Shen Guan, Gu Yi and the others on the stage exclaimed out in surprise. This fire-threaded pearl looked simple, but to achieve Tang Huan's level, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Using a red line to string up 49 pearls, this could be said to be a godly feat. Among all of us, I'm afraid only the great clan elder would be able to do what Tang Huan did. Inside the stage, Gu Yi was praising. Tang Huan actually strung all of those beads on it. Wu Xin could only laugh bitterly. I estimate that it would be pretty good if he could get 20 to 30 beads. Of the 49 pearls, this old man can probably barely make it. It will be impossible for me to be as smooth as Tang Huan. Looking at Tang Huan's back, Shen Guan was deeply moved. This fellow. King Yi's beautiful eyes opened wide. She had thought of the method to test the fire thread piercing pearl, and the 49 pearls on the table in front of Tang Huan were also prepared by her orders, but she did not expect Tang Huan to string them all together. Luckily he had only placed 49 of them. If he had placed 60 or 70 of them, Tang Huan might not even be able to string them up one by one. Tang Huan is really powerful. Within the auction house, Tang Yun's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. Being able to string 49 beads together was one thing, but to be able to control the flame so that all the beads were suspended in midair without dropping anything, the difficulty of Tang Huan's move could be imagined. Is this kid even human? After a brief moment of shock, Wu Yixian smiled bitterly. He had stealthily tried it just now, and when he had condensed the fire to its limit, he estimated that he could only string together a dozen or so pearls at most. Furthermore, the amount of time he had spent maintaining that state of flame was not as long as Tang Huan. With such a method, even if all the weapon refining masters in Glory Continent call out, I'm afraid not many would be able to compare to him. Meng Zhen's eyes were filled with shock. Fortunately, he is the referee, not the opponent. Kuij took a deep breath, suppressing the shock in his chest. Similar sounds would be heard in the hall from time to time. Outside of the arena, however, there was a hubbub of thunder. Huge waves of sound reverberated back and forth in the open ground in a deafening manner. At this time, Tang Huan had already slowly flipped his palm, and the black beads quickly fell on the table. Everyone, have you seen it clearly? Tang Huan retracted the flame in his palm, and his voice resounded once again. Similarly, in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, you were able to tie up 6 pearls, so this second round of weapon refining sacred assembly can be considered as passed. Hearing that, many of the weapon refiner in the hall heaved a sigh of relief, but there were still many with bitter and gloomy expressions. Compared to the 49 beads that Tang Huan had strung together, the 6 beads were indeed much fewer. However, to many middle-stage weapon refiner, this was still a difficult task to accomplish. This was because there were some weapon refiner that were unable to condense their flames to the extent that they could pass through the holes in the bead, much less string them together. Of course, this was also the crux of the exam. Clap clap. On the high platform, Tang Huan was already clapping his hands. Many young men and women who had been waiting at the side of the platform walked back into the hall. All of them were holding trays in their hands. Before long, a tray with 6 black beads was placed on the jade tables in front of the remaining young weapon refiner. Everyone, you can begin. As soon as Tang Huan gave the order, the young weapon refiner moved at almost the same time. A ball of fire consecutively shot out from their palms. Yet Tang Huan had already returned back to his seat. No one could enter the arena to supervise. Under the gazes of a single weapon refining grandmaster, 9 weapon refining masters, no one was able to pass through. Tang Huan, honestly, how many beads can you string like you just now? King Yi leaned her head close to the side of Tang Huan's neck, and her pair of clear and shining beautiful eyes were filled with an unconcealable curiosity. If I can still wear 49 crystals, would you want to beat me up? Tang Huan joked. You're right, I really want to beat you up. King Yi immediately calmed down, clenched his fist and waved it in front of Tang Huan, then said while gnashing his teeth, "Just kidding. Those 49 pellets are already my limit." All along, King Yi had given Tang Huan an impression that he was similar to the intellectual white-collars from his previous life. Now that he saw her fierce expression for the first time, Tang Huan immediately felt that it was interesting. But now was not the time to laugh. Tang Huan's expression became serious and retracted his smile. Chapter 431. Another auction. Really? King Yi sized Tang Huan up from head to toe. Suspicion surfaced on her charming face, as if she did not believe what Tang Huan had said at all. "Absolutely," Tang Huan said resolutely, "deceiving the devil." King Yi curled her red lips and snorted unhappily. It was no wonder she didn't believe him. When Tang Huan had demonstrated fire-threaded pearl earlier, he had been extremely relaxed all along. He didn't look like he had reached his limits at all. Tang Huan laughed and no longer explained. 49 pearls was indeed not his limit. According to his estimation, if he were to continue, he should be able to string around 10 pearls. Within the arena, the atmosphere was already extremely intense. Tang Huan's eyes slightly moved, and 2 gazes immediately fell on Goof's body. 2 phoenix feathers made her flame become extremely tyrannical. Just based on true fire, she should be one of the top 3 young weapon refiner in this auction, and her ability to control flames is also exceptionally outstanding. While Tang Huan was looking at her, she just so happened to string the 6th bead on top of the line of fire. As if she had noticed Tang Huan's gaze, Goof smiled sweetly, as her eyes narrowed into the shape of crescent moons. Her true fire was slightly inferior to Goof's, but her ability to control flames was actually above Goof's. But, thinking about it, Tang Huan felt relieved. The founder of Great Tang Empire, Tang Moyang, was a weapon refining grandmaster. While thinking, Tang Huan's gaze continued to shift across the crowd. Sigh. No, I can't go through it at all. Damn. How could middle-stage weapon refiner do that? Gone. It's another failure. It's already the 7th time. There were constantly young weapon refiner who gave up trying, and walked out of the weapon refining sacred assembly hall with dark faces. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, there were only 100 people left. Congratulations. You have successfully passed the 2nd round. The 3rd round will be up next. Tang Huan once again stood at the front of the stage. In the 3rd round, what you will be tested on is your perception and profound strength. In a bit, I will demonstrate a refining technique. This technique isn't too difficult, and I will give everyone half an hour to practice and comprehend it. If everyone is able to display this technique after 15 minutes, then it will be considered as passed. Just as Tang Huan finished speaking, a young lady brought a black iron ore the size of a millstone in front of Tang Huan. Tang Huan grabbed the ore, and a ball of flame rose up from his palm, enveloping it tightly. In the next moment, the flame started to slowly fluctuate. From afar, it looked like a giant butterfly dancing in the air. The people below the stage all stared wide-eyed, unblinkingly at Tang Huan's right hand, as if they were afraid that they would miss out on every single detail. In less than a dozen breaths of time, Tang Huan had stopped. "Everyone, you may begin." Tang Huan laughed, and the people below the stage returned to their senses, their eyes revealing a look of surprise. They had never seen this kind of refining method that Tang Huan had demonstrated before. It was indeed just as Tang Huan had said. The technique was rather simple, but it was not easy to master it after just one look. For a moment, the entire venue was silent. No one was in a hurry to make a move, and was carefully pondering over the method Tang Huan had displayed just now. At this time, another young man and woman entered the competition grounds and brought each of them an iron ore the size of a millstone. After half a quarter of an hour, someone finally started to try. Interesting. Tang Huan is actually acting as the referee for the weapon refining sacred assembly. Inside the Star Ocean restaurant, Xing Yan laughed out loud in surprise. Yesterday, When she found out that Tang Huan was already a weapon refining master, she originally thought that he wouldn't appear on top of the weapon refining sacred assembly today, but unexpectedly, Tang Huan still showed up. After a slight pause, Xing Yan's gaze landed on the middle-aged man opposite of him, and he said slowly, "Tonight's weapon auction is ready." "It's all ready." The middle-aged man quickly nodded his head. "Good. Immediately release the news." "Yes, sir," the middle-aged man replied before retreating. Xing Yan narrowed her beautiful eyes, excitement blazing between her brows. "A heavenly-grade armament that is comparable to a saint-rank weapon. The exact price it can be auctioned for will be known tonight." 30 pieces of heavenly-grade armament. Selling them for 5 or 6 billion should not be a problem. Star Ocean Commerce is auctioning 30 pieces of the heavenly-grade armament forged by Tang Hua tonight. The Spirit Feather Merchant Guild's Wing Ting was stunned for a moment before chuckling. This woman is quite shrewd. After the 30 heavenly-grade armament are sold, their superior quality will definitely spread out very quickly. At that time, the Star Ocean Commerce will release news that the second round of auctions will definitely attract buyers from all over the Glory Continent, and will also push the price of those heavenly-grade armament to an even higher level. General Manager, in a few days, Tang Huan should be able to deliver our Spirit Feather Merchant Guild's few dozen heavenly-grade armament. At that time, do we need to auction them? The middle-aged man in black across from him couldn't help but ask. Just by looking at the popularity of the last high-ranking weapon auction held by the Star Ocean Commerce, one could tell how lively the heavenly-grade armament auction would be. After all, what Tang Huan had forged was not an ordinary heavenly-grade armament, but a heavenly-grade armament with might comparable to a holy-ranked weapon. Above Glory Continent, holy-ranked weapons were extremely rare. Even if it was the Stage 9 Martial Saint S, they would not necessarily be able to get one each. After all, the materials were hard to find, but heavenly-grade armament forged by Tang Huan could completely be used as a holy-ranked weapon. With enough gold, no one would want to miss such a godsend opportunity. There's no rush. After all the Star Ocean Commerces are sold out, it won't be too late for us to take them out and sell them in a few years. Perhaps the price will be even higher. Ever since the news of Tang Huan forging 98 heavenly-grade armament in 10 days had been spread out, countless experts within the Heavenly Forging City had been paying close attention to the astonishing quantity of weapons that were being sold. There were even some that went to the Star Ocean Commerce to ask if they were for sale. Right now, the moment the news of the Star Ocean Commerce auctioning 30 heavenly-grade armaments was released, it was first investigated by the various powers in the Heavenly Forging City, and then, it spread throughout the entire Heavenly Forging City at an astonishing speed. Not long later, the entire city nearly boiled over with news. Many of the rich and powerful forces and martial warriors were all rubbing their hands together. At this time, in the plaza outside of Divine Weapon Pavilion, the sound waves formed from all sorts of noises continuously reverberated in the sky like thunder. Within the venue where countless gazes had gathered, this time around, the Weapon Refining Sacred Assembly had already proceeded to the final moment. Chapter 432 Additional Awards. Phew. Huff. The sound of the flames tearing through the air rose and fell unceasingly. In the vast plaza, only 45 figures remained. All of them were gathered together. Before this, there were still over 100 people that had passed the second round of the Sacred Assembly. However, the third round had more than half of them eliminated, leaving only these 45 people to participate in the final round. Amongst these people, there were more than a dozen high-level weapon refiner. The rest were all middle-level weapon refiner. The content of the fourth round of examination was very simple. It was to forge an intermediate-grade weapon. Everyone used the same material, a piece of spirit iron and 2 mid-grade gems. However, every time Weapon Refining Sacred Assembly chose a mid-ranked gem, it would become harder to smelt. At that moment, no matter if it was Great Clan Elder Shen Guan, Tang Huan, Gu Yi, King Yi and the others, they had all walked down the stage and were all in the competition grounds. Bam! The sound of an explosion could be heard. It was a white-clothed man who failed in drawing the spirit map. After being stunned for a moment, he punched his head in frustration. A weapon refining grandmaster and 9 weapon refining masters stood to the side and watched. This made many young weapon refiners quite nervous, and those who failed along the way appeared one after another, including the white-clothed man. There were already 10 losers. However, there were also many young weapon refiners who had already finished forging, such as Wu Yixian, Meng Zhen, Kuij, Goof and the others. A middle-ranked weapon was already placed on the jade table in front of them. Done. A shout suddenly sounded out. It was a long sword that Tang Yun placed on the table, then jumped up in excitement. After a while, seeing that Shen Guan and the rest were all looking at her, the little girl felt embarrassed. She immediately stuck out her tongue, and sat on the praying mat with a serious look on her face. After Tang Yun, there were also a few other people who had completed their forging. Everyone, time is up, Tang Huan suddenly said, and almost at the same time he finished speaking, the last few grains of sand beside the hourglass also fell. Just a bit more, just a bit more. An hour passed so quickly. Sigh, what a pity. The entire venue was instantly filled with cries of agony. Because he had used the spirit iron, he only gave the weapon refining sacred assembly an hour for the 4th round. Of the 45 people, only 18 of them had completed their forging within the time limit. This meant that other than the 10 that had failed midway, the other 17 had to be eliminated. Congratulations. You have all passed the 4th round. Tang Huan's gaze moved slightly as he swept his gaze across the 18 people in front of him, and said with a smile, Great Clan Elder and all the masters, after seeing the middle-ranked weapons that you all have forged, you will decide which one will be the top 3 of this time's weapon refining sacred assembly apostrophe. After pausing for a moment, Tang Huan continued, other than the gem rewards, everyone who has passed the 4th round can enter the weapon refining sacred assembly. First place, can enter the sacred hall for 15 days. Second place, can enter the sacred hall for 12 days. Third place, can enter for 9 days. The others who pass the 4th round can enter the temple for 6 days. These days could be superimposed on the days obtained by the newly advanced S after they pass the test tablet. Therefore, middle stage weapon refiner can keep this reward in hand until you advance to a high stage weapon refiner. What, can even enter the tools method hall? Hearing Tang Huan's words, the crowd immediately burst into cheers. The young weapon refiner who had passed the 4th round of the sacred assembly were elated and incomparably excited, while the other 20 to 30 eliminated weapon refiners, who had yet to leave, all uncontrollably revealed looks of envy. Every time the 4th round of weapon refining sacred assembly ended, an additional reward would be announced. However, the rewards were always uncertain. Sometimes it could be a few more precious gems as a reward, or it could also be some other precious herbs or pills, or it could even be some equipment used to forge weapons. Everyone was looking forward to the extra reward this time, but what everyone didn't expect was that the reward this time was the number of days they had to enter the tools method temple. The value of the reward was far beyond those gems, medicinal herbs or equipment, and it was even more so for those weapon refiners who had never entered the tools method temple before. Everyone, please bring out the weapons you have forged. Tang Huan smiled again. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but step forward and place their weapons on the jade tables in front of Tang Huan. After returning to their original positions, everyone's gazes were fixed on Shen Guan and the rest. They were actually looking at them without blinking. Shen Guan and the others did not make a sound, but the weapons on the jade table were taken away one by one, and then placed on the other side. The weapons that were taken away were obviously excluded from the top 3. Every time a weapon left the jade table, a young weapon refiner would reveal a look of disappointment. After a long while, only 5 weapons remained on the jade table. Of the 5 weapons, there were 2 more that had to be eliminated before the ranking would begin. Meng Zhen, Goof, and Tang Yun all watched on anxiously, their expressions showing some nervousness. Out of the 5 weapons, 3 of them belonged to them. The other 2 pieces belonged to Wu Yixian and Kuij respectively. Wu Yixian, on the other hand, had a calm expression and an indifferent smile on his face. As for Kuij, he was also smiling merrily with a face full of confidence. However, in the next instant, Kuij's expression changed. Amongst the remaining weapons, the first one to be taken was shockingly the single-edged axe that he had forged, and the one that had eliminated his weapon was Tang Huan. How is this possible? Kuij couldn't believe his eyes. In the next moment, he couldn't help but take a few steps forward, furiously saying, "Great Elder, and all masters, the speed at which I forged this weapon is far faster than anyone else's. Moreover, there isn't any problem with the quality of the weapon." Although he was asking Shen Guan, Gu Yi and the others, he was staring straight at Tang Huan. He clenched his fists tightly. The veins on the back of his hands and his forehead were popping up. This result was really hard for him to accept. "Are you questioning me?" Tang Huan raised his eyes slightly, his expression calm. His tone was calm, but as he spoke, a tyrannical and fearless imposing aura overflowed, bringing about a terrifying might as it swept towards Kuij. On this weapon refining sacred assembly today, Tang Huan had always been smiling from head to toe, but at this moment, Kuij felt a surge of irresistible force roaring at him. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Chapter 433 makes you convinced. "Kuesong, don't be rude." Shen Guan's face darkened as he shouted out loud. Gu Yi, Wu Xin and the other weapon refining masters also had displeased expressions on their faces. "I just don't understand it." Kuij's face flushed red as he gnashed his teeth. He actually managed to quickly get rid of the cowardice in his heart as he stared at Tang Huan again, his eyes full of anger and impatience. In fact, not only did he not understand, but many people around him also did not understand. In those 4 rounds of examinations, Kuij had passed with the fastest speed possible. His tool's method attainments would definitely be extraordinary, let alone becoming the head of the sacred assembly. Becoming the top 3 would not be a problem, but to remove the weapon he was forging now, it meant that he couldn't even get into the top 3. "If you don't understand, then I'll make you understand." Tang Huan squinted his eyes, and then picked up the single-edged axe again, and said, "Although this weapon was successfully forged, the timing for drawing the spirit map was a little too early, and furthermore, there are at least 9 parts of the spirit map that are worth discussing. For example, the spirit map at the edge of the axe." Every time Tang Huan pointed out a mistake, Kuij's expression became uglier. He thought that he would draw the spirit map with one breath, and that it would be perfect, but he never thought that in Tang Huan's eyes, the spirit map would be full of loopholes. Furthermore, Tang Huan's words made sense, and he opened his mouth a few times to refute it, but in the end, he could not make a sound. Furthermore, Shen Guan, Gu Yi and the rest were all nodding their heads from time to time, obviously agreeing with Tang Huan's judgment. Originally, he knew that Tang Huan wouldn't participate in the Sacred Assembly and he had to obtain the position of the Sacred Assembly's chief for sure, but now. These mistakes will at least reduce the power of the weapon by 30%. Tang Huan's gaze turned sharp. "Now, do you still think that by relying on this weapon, you can enter the top 3 ranks of this time's weapon refining sacred assembly apostrophe?" "Well said," Gu Yi laughed. "Tang Huan, I can only see 5 mistakes in the spirit map of this weapon, but you actually saw 9. This old man says you are inferior." 2 years ago, he was the referee for the weapon refining competition and Tang Huan was only the weapon refining competition. The 2 of them, regardless of identity or strength, were worlds apart, but in the short span of 2 years, Tang Huan was the same as him, and became the referee for the weapon refining sacred assembly with a higher standard. Furthermore, whether it was strength or tools method attainments, Tang Huan was already above him. Nothing in the world could be more amazing than that. However, Gu Yi was also incomparably gratified when he saw how quickly Tang Huan had grown from a tiny low-leveled weapon refiner back then to this day. At the end of the day, for Tang Huan to reach his current state, the map of the spiritual fire that he had provided back then had also played a significant role. Not only Gu Yi, Wu Xin, Ni Wuji and the others were also impressed. "Master, you are too kind." Tang Huan's face revealed a smile. King Yi looked at Tang Huan in admiration, then his gaze landed on Kuij. "The fastest is not necessarily the best, Kuij. You can leave now." Grand Elder and Grand Masters, no matter how lacking the weapons I forge, it doesn't mean that my weapon is inferior to the other 4 weapons. Kuij's expression was unsettled, but he was still unconvinced. If it was someone else, they might have retreated obediently. However, he had always been proud and arrogant, and had prepared for several years for this weapon refining sacred assembly, hoping to seize first place in one fell swoop. Moreover, he was a stage 9 martial saint's last disciple, so the divine weapon pavilion would not do anything to him. "How dare you?" Hearing his words, Shen Guan was immediately enraged, a terrifying aura gushing out. Towards these talented young weapon refiner, Shen Guan had always loved and protected them, even when they were like Tang Huan and had never truly joined the divine weapon pavilion. Before this, he had also paid quite a bit of attention to this Kuesong from the Shalong Empire. But now, it seems that this person was truly a bit too reckless. Kuij looked as if he had suffered a heavy blow as he groaned. His face was somewhat pale, but he forcefully lifted his neck and looked towards Tang Huan. Many of the surrounding weapon refiners secretly shook their heads when they saw this. Although Kuij had the strength, he was still a bit stubborn. If he persisted like this, it was equivalent to offending Shen Guan and the rest. The crowd outside the hall had also noticed the commotion. Their interest had been piqued. The earth-shaking voices had risen once again. "Grand Elder, please calm your anger." Tang Huan sized Kuij up with a glance and actually started to admire him. Although this fellow from the Shalong Empire was not tall, he was quite courageous. His lips immediately curved into a faint smile. "Since that's the case, Kuij, I'll sincerely accept this." Tang Huan picked up the remaining 4 weapons, and explained the pros and cons in detail. He also recounted the entire forging process through the weapons, such as the method used to refine the spirit-flexible iron, and how good the fire was during the smelting of the gems. Not only did Shen Guan and the others nod their heads when they heard him, Meng Zhen, Wu Yi, Goof and the others also couldn't help but reveal looks of surprise. What was especially astonishing was that not only did Tang Huan point out the flaws in the weapon, he also pointed out the flaws in the forging process, as well as all the improvements and things that he needed to pay attention to. Not to mention Meng Zhen and the others who were enlightened, the surrounding weapon refineress had also gained a lot. Good. Alright." Looking at Tang Huan who was about to put down his sword, Shen Guan's face was filled with a smile of praise, and immediately said the word "good." Tang Huan's analysis and explanation of the 4 weapons earlier were extremely thorough, and even if it was him or the Divine Weapon Pavilion Master, it would not be able to do it better than Tang Huan. However, when his gaze landed on Kuij on the opposite side, Shen Guan's gaze immediately darkened. "Kuij, what else do you have to say?" I've lost." The Kuesong returned to its senses, its head drooping like a frosted eggplant as it weakly uttered those few characters, its eyes filled with shame. Shen Guan snorted and said, "Everyone, you have heard the difference between these 4 weapons clearly. Do you still have any questions?" Meng Zhen, Wu Yixian, Goof and Tang Yun all shook their heads at the same time. Although the result had not been announced yet, after hearing Tang Huan's explanation just now, he knew that it was impossible for him to enter the top 3. Just like Kuij, he had also come for the chief of the sacred congregation. However, he didn't expect this to happen in the end. Aside from the well-known Wu Yixian, there were 2 other girls in the top 3. Chapter 434 to 200 million. Meng Zhen had heard of the name of Tang Yun. She was the little princess of the Great Tang Empire, and her tools method talent was not bad. 2 years ago, she had obtained 3rd place in the Furious Waves City's weapon refining competition, and adding that her great-grandfather Tang Moyang was a stage 9 martial saint and a weapon refining grandmaster, it was normal for him to guide her to enter the top 3. As for the other woman called Goof, it was Meng Zhen's first time hearing of her. The Gu family she was born in was indeed a great clan in the Furious Waves city, but if it was placed in the entire Glory continent, it would be rather ordinary. Before this, Goof had always been a person of unknown nationality, and even when he was at the weapon refining competition level 2 years ago, she still did not appear. However, this time around, she was like a dark horse as she appeared out of nowhere and entered the top 3 like Tang Yun. However, although Goof's reputation was not great, the weapons that she forged were indeed not bad. Being squeezed out of the top 3 by 2 little girls, although Meng Zhen felt depressed, he had nothing to say. Tang Huan, the results of the weapon refining sacred assembly will be announced by you. Shen Guan smiled and looked at Tang Huan. Yes. Tang Huan slightly nodded his head, then, his gaze swept across Wu Yixian and the rest, and shouted loudly, "Everyone, this weapon refining sacred assembly is officially over. The one who obtains 3rd place is Furious Waves City Goof, and the one who obtains 2nd is Luoshen City's Tang Yun, and the one who obtains 1st is Heavenly Forging City's Wu Yixian. Now, please enter the Divine Weapon Pavilion to receive your rewards." "Yes, sir." Everyone responded with different expressions. However, the surroundings of the venue were filled with exclamations of shock. They were slightly further away from each other and could only faintly guess that Kuij had a dispute with Tang Huan. They did not know what had happened in the arena just now, and naturally, even more so did not know about the detailed explanation and analysis of those few weapons that Tang Huan had given them. At this moment, when they suddenly heard Tang Huan's announcement of the results, everyone was even more surprised. Wu Yixian, Tang Yun, Goof, why weren't there any Kuisongs or Meng Zhen? The 2 of them are high-ranking weapon refineress and they have been promoted for 2 to 3 years. Wu Yixian has become the chief of the Sacred Assembly. He deserves his name. I have heard of Tang Yun and Wu Yixian, who is Goof. Even more powerful than Kuij and Meng Zhen. So there's yet another tools method genius in Furious Waves City? Among the crowd, there were many different opinions. However, no matter how many people discussed, the curtain to this weapon refining sacred assembly still fell. Other than those who were eliminated in the first round, the rest of the young weapon refineress all gathered their thoughts and entered the first floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion one after another. However, before the crowd could disperse, a piece of news exploded in the crowd like a thunderclap. Tonight, Star Ocean Commerce was holding another auction, and the people being auctioned were precisely those heavenly grade armament that Tang Huan had been forging for the past 10 days. The heavenly grade armament that Tang Huan forged is said to be comparable to a holy ranked weapon. This time, I can't miss out on it no matter what. Quick, go back and collect the gold notes. In this auction, our Liu family will have to buy at least 2 weapons. Luo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King. http://www.bikes.com/0_48/tsk. A high-grade weapon forged by Tang Huan would cost 20 to 30,000 gold coins each. This heavenly grade armament is worth 1 to 200 million gold coins. It's really too expensive. Luo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King. http://www.bikes.com/0_48/. Buying a heavenly grade armament forged by Tang Huan is equivalent to buying a saint rank weapon. Saint tier equipment, 1 or 200 million each. Is it expensive? No one had the mood to stay any longer. With an earth-shattering roar, a large number of figures scattered in all directions. Not long after that, the surrounding area of the square became a lot more sparse. Auction? Hearing the huge noise coming from behind, Tang Huan unknowingly smiled. After announcing the results, Tang Huan entered the Divine Weapon Pavilion as well. However, he did not stay behind to watch the show, but bid farewell to Shen Guan and the others, and went to the Wonder Artifact Hall alone. Inside the wide palace, the little girl was cultivating, but Zhao Butian was deep in sleep as he listened to her bulging belly creak. Once the door closed, the sound of the outside was isolated. Tang Huan calmed his heart and continued forging the weapon. As the night deepened, the first floor of Star Ocean Weapon Shop was brightly lit. However, A large crowd of people were moving around, rubbing their shoulders as deafening shouts erupted from time to time. At this time, the Star Ocean Commerce's auction had already begun. Almost as soon as the first weapon went on stage, it triggered a fight. The intensity of the fight even surpassed the last high-grade weapon auction. 150 million, 170 million, 175 million. In the corridor on the third floor, Xingyan leaned on the railing and looked at the scene below. There was an unconcealable surprise in her beautiful black eyes. 200 million. After a thunderous roar, the first floor finally quieted down. 200 million. Miss, it's 200 million. Hearing this voice, a middle-aged man beside Xingyan gasped, then his face flushed red from excitement. His eyes shone with light. A heavenly grade armament forged by Master Tang Huan. TSK, the temptation is too great. One piece can sell for 200 million. That's right. Xingyan nodded slightly and exhaled deeply. He blew his veil and the surprise in his eyes had been completely replaced by happiness. The young miss is bold. The middle-aged man was actually so excited that his face started to twist. For the past half year, Miss has been gathering the gems from the various branch names of Glory Continent and Origin Continent. Those old fellows from the Merchant Guild are trying to make things difficult for us. Let's see what else they can say now. Even if the average value of 98 heavenly grade armaments is less than 200 million, our Star Ocean Commerce would still be able to make billions. No matter how much gold I earn, it's just a number. Xingyan smiled lightly, and said slowly, to be able to become friends with a talented genius like Tang Huan, this is something that no matter how much gold you earn, you can't buy. Pass down the order, continue to collect high-grade gems, heaven-ranked gems, and even saint-grade gems. Yes, sir. The middle-aged man happily left. On the veil, Xingyan's red lips slightly pursed, as her two eyes once again landed on the sea of people heading to the first floor of the weapon shop. After yelling out a high price of 200 million gold coins, the intense competition finally came to an end. The first heavenly grade armament of this auction was also taken away by a thin old man. Looking at the happy old man, Xingyan squinted her eyes. She knew that he was one of the stewards of the Liu family. The Liu family was the same as the Wu family, which was an aristocratic family with thousands of years of history. There were many families like Liu and Wu in the Heavenly Forging City. After missing out on the high-grade weapon that was auctioned last time, the auction this time around was simply too hard for the rich and powerful thousand-year families to restrain themselves. After a while, the second heavenly grade armament was taken out and a new round of intense competition started once again. Chapter 435. Consecutive Phantom. 190 million, 180 million, 250 million yuan. Now that the heavenly grade armaments had found their rightful places, it was extremely noisy in the Star Ocean weapon shop. Roughly 2 hours later, the auction finally ended. They were very clear that the number of heavenly grade armament that Tang Huan asked Divine Weapon Pavilion to send over was 98. Tonight, Star Ocean Commerce only auctioned 30 of them, which meant that there were still 68 heavenly grade armament of the same quality that were sent over. It was a pity that the Star Ocean Commerce did not show any signs of taking out any more weapons to bid on them. As a result, some aristocratic families or big powers had their sights set on Xingyan, wanting to directly purchase weapons at a high price. Of course, these people had all failed without exception, and could only helplessly leave in the end. However, the news about this auction made Heavenly Forging City boil once again. The price of 30 heavenly grade armaments was actually as high as 5,700 million. Counting the price, the average price of each heavenly grade armament reached 190 million. In the past few hundred years, no weapon refiner had ever forged a heavenly grade armament that could sell it for such a high price. Even the heavenly grade armament forged by the Glory Sacred Emperor couldn't be sold at such a high price. When he was at Furious Waves City's blacksmith shop, he had to help people forge middle-tier weapons. With the 2 auctions that took place in the Heavenly Forging City, Tang Huan's reputation had been completely cleared. The martial warriors who could not get a single heavenly grade armament this time were all vexed. But very quickly, another piece of news spread across the heavenly forging city. It was that in 3 months, the Star Ocean Commerce would auction another 30 pieces of the heavenly grade armament that Tang Huan had forged. After a short period of excitement, many people who wanted to participate in the auction were smiling wryly to themselves. 3 months' time was enough for this news to spread throughout the Glory Continent and the Origin Continent. Who knew how many people would rush to the heavenly forging city with large amounts of gold notes in their hands? At that time, the bidding would be even more intense. In this situation, many people had their eyes on Tang Huan. If they wanted to provide materials, asking Tang Huan to forge a heavenly grade armament, even giving Tang Huan tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of gold coins, was much more worthwhile than going to the Star Ocean Commerce to bid for a weapon. However, their wish was destined to end in failure, because they would not even be able to meet Tang Huan face to face. The moment that weapon refining sacred assembly had finished, Tang Huan had never left Wonder Artifact Hall, as Divine Weapon Pavilion had enough round fusion pills for him to consume. As the days passed, the number of weapons on the long table behind Tang Huan also increased. This time, Tang Huan's speed of forging weapons had slightly decreased compared to the past few days. Now, he spent even more of his energy on studying and refining various types of weapons. Unknowingly, it was already the 6th of the 6th month. Just as the sky had turned white, a black figure appeared at the entrance of the return room in the eastern region of Heavenly Forging City. This man was Tang Huan. Last night, after he had refined all of the materials provided by the Spirit Feather Merchant Guild, Tang Huan did not cultivate nor did he sleep, and he practically sat in Wonder Artifact Hall for the entire night. In the wee hours of the morning, before the sky brightened, he had already come here to wait, while the little girl and Zhao Budian were still inside Divine Weapon Pavilion's Wonder Artifact Hall. Today was the day that the old fatty had arranged to meet him in his letter. What made Tang Huan speechless was that the old fatty did not write down the exact time. Since it was like this, Tang Huan came over early so that he wouldn't miss out on the old fatty. This returning home was an estate of the Glory Sacred Temple, and also one of Shan Shan's. It was a pity that Shan Shan was currently not in the Heavenly Forging City. Otherwise, he could ask for her help. What Tang Huan was worried about the most was whether or not the old fatty would set him up. If the old fatty came but didn't want to show his face, with Heavenly Forging City being so big, there was no way he could find him. After sitting down in the shadows beside the place they had returned from, Tang Huan couldn't help but worry about his future. Unknowingly, the sky began to brighten and people started to appear in groups of 2 or 3 on the streets. Tang Huan's gaze did not miss the figures that approached the return residence. However, his actions had attracted many curious and suspicious gazes. Creak, a grinding sound could be heard as the door to the residence was opened. Tang Huan stood up and walked to the door to the place where he had returned to. But right at that moment, Tang Huan's heart was alarmed. He did not even have the time to turn his head. He had already thrusted out the dragon and phoenix spear in his hand. The vast genuine chi that contained a terrifying heat rushed into the spear body like a raging storm. The terrifying strength chi surged out from the spear's body. In the blink of an eye, the spear sheath was torn apart. The bright and resplendent light exploded and scattered. Ding! In a split second, a sharp and ear-piercing sound of impact resounded in the air. Tang Huan felt as if the spear in his hand was hit by the fast-moving locomotive in his previous life, and immediately after, an extremely tyrannical force rushed towards the spear like a collapsing dam. Tang Huan groaned. His body, which had just turned halfway, was actually like a kite with its string cut as he flew away on a cloud. Out of the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of a black light dropping to the ground, and in an instant, it had completely melted away, as if it had never appeared. From the shape of the black light, it seemed to be a arrow. Ghost arrows. These 4 words suddenly surfaced in his mind, causing Tang Huan's heart to tremble. After arriving at the Heavenly Forging City, Tang Huan first entered the Tools Method Temple and then entered the Sky Spirit Secret Realm. Only until recently did he just exit there, and after training and tempering for more than a year, he had almost forgotten about the secluded Night Divine Palace. However, he did not expect that the archer of the secluded Night Divine Palace would actually chase after him like a ghost to the Heavenly Forging City, and even so bravely try to assassinate him inside the Heavenly Forging City. They were both archers, but compared to the archer outside Crescent City, this archer now was countless of times stronger. Merely from that arrow just now, Tang Huan could determine that his opponent was a martial lord at the peak of the 8th stage whose strength had already been raised to the limit. A stage 7 martial master that could use a specter arrows could kill a martial lord of the 8th step, facing a who was at the peak of the 8th step and possessed a phantom arrow. Even a stage 9 martial saint would fall at any time. Furthermore, Tang Huan felt that the opponent was not an ordinary peak of the 8th step martial lord, but the most dangerous thing was that the opponent could very likely not just be an archer. However, Tang Huan understood that the more dangerous it was, the more he must not panic. With a twist of his waist, his body forcibly dropped down to the stairs in front of Return to Home. With a thump, the stone staircase immediately shattered into countless pieces that scattered out in all directions. Chapter 436, Attacking Kai. The sharp sound of something tearing through the air rang again. It was the dragon and phoenix lance in Tang Huan's hands that pierced outwards once again, and at the same time, the 9 Yang Divine Furnace and 5 colors spiritual pills within Tang Huan's Donjon were also activated to their limits. Luo Continent 3, Legend of the Dragon King. http://www.bikes.com/0_48/ Previous chapter, Table of Contents. This time, the direction of Tang Huan's spear attack was completely different from the one before. Ding! But after a split second, a loud and sharp sound of impact resounded once again. To Tang Huan's right, another specter arrows fell to the ground. Compared to the previous arrow, the power released from this arrow was far weaker. The archer should only be a peak rank 7 great martial master. However, the archers sent by the secluded Night Divine Palace were not 2 people, but 3 people, because in the next moment, Tang Huan caught sight of 3 specter magic arrows, flying at him from the front, back and right at the same time. All 3 directions were blocked by the specter arrows, and on the left was the return residence. At this time, the best method was to directly smash through the wall and hide within the return to home area. However, that way, the waiters who were cleaning inside would soon be affected. Secluded Night Divine Palace had 3 archers, but more than 3 killers. Tang Huan had also discovered a few suspicious people, but they had not acted yet. However, if Tang Huan were to hide in the return residence, those people would definitely follow him in immediately. They did not care whether fighting in the return residence would harm the innocent. In order to kill Tang Huan, any obstructing person would probably be conveniently wiped clean by them. Whoosh! Seemingly without any hesitation, Tang Huan suddenly shot forward, the spear in his hands also striking at the specter arrows in front of him. Although the 3 arrows had been shot out at about the same time, their speed was still somewhat different. The arrow coming from the front was the fastest, and also the most violent. The last arrow was slightly slower, while the one on the right was the slowest. Of course, this kind of slow was only in comparison. The 3 arrows were like shooting stars as they streaked across the sky, and the naked eye could not see their trajectory at all. With Tang Huan's current condition, wanting to dodge 3 arrows at the same time was completely impossible. In a split second, Tang Huan made a decision. He would dodge an arrow, use his long spear to block an arrow, and then use his flesh body to block the arrow. Kai! The moment the fiery red spear tip roared forward, the vigorous genuine qi in Tang Huan's body started to surge towards his back. It even went so far as to reveal his body, condensing into a thick layer of genuine qi barrier in the small area between his shoulders. The tyrannical power started to spread out quickly. Ding! Amidst the piercing sound of metal clashing, Tang Huan once again felt a surge of incomparably berserk energy surging towards him. Last time, Tang Huan counterattacked when he was caught off guard, but this time, Tang Huan was already prepared. Even though his arms were a little numb, his feet still firmly stood on the ground. Almost at the same time, the Spectre Magic Arrow at the back also landed on the genuine Qi barrier on Tang Huan's back, while the Spectre Magic Arrow at the right was whistled past Tang Huan's waist at an angle, piercing into the stone stairs that was right in front of them. Bam! Amidst the explosive sounds, shattered rocks filled the sky. Following that, two dang-dang sounds resonated, and the two Spectre arrows fell onto the ground at almost the same time, while the barrier condensed from genuine Qi behind Tang Huan also exploded and dissipated into nothingness. Although the archer at the back could not compare to the person at the front, he was stronger than the one on the right. He should also be a martial lord of the 8th step. Although he was blocked by the genuine Qi, but to be able to withstand such an arrow, Tang Huan's internal organs were still slightly injured. However, Tang Huan possessed the Sun Spirit body, so he could completely endure such a small injury. Whoosh! Without the slightest hesitation, Tang Huan started to move forward once again. The trajectory of the spear was not in a straight line, but was moving left and right, jumping forward and churning, without any pattern. The spear in his hand was also constantly adjusting its direction, so that he could swiftly unleash his spear. His movements was unpredictable and his speed was even faster than lightning. The three archers no longer locked onto Tang Huan, and in just a few breaths of time, Tang Huan had already traversed tens of meters of space. Right then, 20 meters away from Tang Huan was a wall, and the peak of the 8th step archer was right behind it. At such a distance, Tang Huan could even clearly see the archer's breathing, heartbeat, and aura undulations that were trying his best to be restrained. However, there was more than one archer behind the wall. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! After a short moment, a loud sound reverberated and the wall seemed to have been hit by a giant rock, creating a large hole in it. Dust and bricks flew out like a volcanic eruption, and immediately afterwards, two black shadows flashed out from the hole like ghosts. However, their eyes were extremely cold and fierce, as if they did not have the slightest bit of emotion. One person wielded a spear, the other held a blade. They pounced towards Tang Huan with lightning speed. At the same time, three middle-aged men who were similarly dressed appeared behind Tang Huan. The five people surrounded Tang Huan without saying a word. Whoosh! Tang Huan's pupil shrank suddenly. His footsteps did not pause at all as he continued to strangely move forward, the vigilance in his heart rising to the maximum. Tang Huan was very clear that the main force of secluded Night Divine Palace's assassination this time was still the three hidden archers. The five assassins only appeared to share the pressure on the archers and to create an opportunity for them to make a move next time. Although the three archers didn't make any movement, they were like poisonous snakes that were lying in wait. Once the time was right, they would definitely show their vicious fangs once again. Ho! In a blink of an eye, the long spear in Tang Huan's hands started to dance. Above the spearhead, flames surged up and rapidly expanded. A blazing heat spread out in all directions. After a flick of his finger, the flame at the spearhead turned into a red sun, and then, like a meteorite falling from the sky, it roared at the black-clothed man in front of him. That secluded Night Divine Palace was clearly aware of Tang Huan's achievements in the Wofu world, and knew that assassins with too low of a cultivation level could kill Tang Huan, which was no different from throwing their lives away. Therefore, the five middle-aged men that were sent this time were all martial lords at the peak of the 8th step. And at such a dangerous moment, the first thing Tang Huan did was to use the 5th form of the flaming rainbow spear art, Sunny Flames of the Falling Sun. Ho! Wherever the red sun passed, space violently fluctuated. A terrifying heat wave rolled out like rolling waves. The temperature of this small region actually rapidly increased. Kai, the man in black, was expressionless. The black spear in his hand stabbed towards the red sun with lightning speed. Chapter 437, Critical Moments. Bam! Amidst the heaven-shaking sound, the violent strength Qi spread out, causing the air to distort. The long spear in the black-clothed man's hand slipped out, and his body was immediately engulfed by the red light. He was then involuntarily sent flying backwards. Tang Huan's footsteps did not stop. The dragon and phoenix lance had already swept towards the other black-clothed middle-aged man. The terrifying might of the spear and its consequences finally caused the black-clothed middle-aged man's face to change. The long blade in his hand that was about to cut forward suddenly changed, the blade's body dragging a touch of inky black light as it flew towards the dragon and phoenix spear. Clang! In an instant, the sword and the spear collided fiercely. A deafening sound rang out as a terrifying power suddenly erupted, and the black-clothed middle-aged man was sent flying along with his blade. At this time, Tang Huan only needed to strike once more to finish him off. However, not only did Tang Huan not give chase, he leapt forward like a hungry tiger pouncing on a sheep. Bang! Bam! The moment Tang Huan left, two black lights pierced through the place where he was previously standing, and landed diagonally on the ground. Dust exploded as two pits a few meters apart appeared. The black arrow in one pit was melting rapidly, while the arrow in the other pit remained where it was. A phantom arrow and an ordinary arrow? Tang Huan walked around 10 meters and snorted inwardly. He did not see what was happening behind him, but from the sound, he was able to determine that the archer in the rear was releasing a specter arrows, while the one on the right was an ordinary long arrow. At this moment, not far away from him, the black-clothed man who had been blasted out of Tang Huan's spear technique Sunny Sunset was standing up unsteadily. His clothes were tattered, and his appearance was a mess. Kai. The long spear was like a dragon, traversing the sky with a speed that was difficult to be seen with the naked eye. The battered middle-aged man didn't even have the time to dodge before the sharp tip of the spear had pierced through his chest. A blood-curdling screech filled the air as the black-robed man was lifted up into the air. Tang Huan swung his arm, and the black-clothed middle-aged man's body flew out of the spear and towards the wall in front of him, producing a loud hissing sound with astonishing might. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! A large hole once again appeared in the wall. Behind the wall, a black shadow could be vaguely seen amidst the rising smoke and dust. He was the archer of the secluded Night Divine Palace, and he was also the strongest one. However, Tang Huan no longer had the chance to chase after it, because in the instant that the black figure appeared, a specter arrows had already ripped apart the dust and sand in the sky, quietly passing through the hole that had just been smashed open and flying straight towards Tang Huan's chest. The moment he caught a glimpse of the black light, Tang Huan reflexively shifted to the left. However, just then, another hole in the wall, a ghost arrow, appeared and went straight for Tang Huan's chest. Tang Huan's heart trembled. The archer's previous arrow was obviously meant to force him to dodge to the left. On the right of Tang Huan was the black-clothed man who was just blown away by Tang Huan. Moreover, that man's long blade was already slashing towards him. In such a situation, anyone would dodge to the left. After the archer shot the arrow, he immediately moved to another hole a few meters away from the wall and shot another arrow. This arrow was aimed precisely at Tang Huan's teleportation path. If he could not react in time, he would immediately be hit by the incoming arrows. If he stopped immediately, he would definitely be stuck in the middle of the arrows and stop for a short moment. A battle at this level was extremely dangerous even if it was just a blink of an eye. At this moment, Tang Huan already felt a great sense of danger. The moment he stopped in his tracks, the two specter arrows flashed by him one after the other. Almost at the same time, Tang Huan's body fell to his right and shot forward like a snake. As expected, the moment he fell to the ground, another two ghost magic arrows passed where he was standing a moment ago. Ho! Tang Huan leaped into the air, his spear thrusting forward. The blade that had cut through the air, before retracting its power, was already slanted to the side, while the dragon and phoenix lance in Tang Huan's hand stuck close to the blade and smashed towards the black-clothed middle-aged man, releasing a sharp grinding sound, as though it was tearing apart his eardrums. The black-clothed middle-aged man hurriedly released his grip and retreated. However, he was still not faster than the spear light that shot out from the tip of his spear. Kai! As the red light flashed past, The black-clothed middle-aged man didn't even have the time to let out a scream before his body was ripped apart. Not waiting for his body to land on the ground, Tang Huan swept his spear once, and the middle-aged man in black who no longer had any signs of life was sent flying backwards. Immediately after, 2 ordinary arrows nearly descended on his body at the same time. Whoosh! Tang Huan's body moved like a ray of light, taking advantage of the momentum and pouncing towards the hole in front of him. As long as he went behind the wall, the besieged situation would immediately improve. However, just as he was about to pass through the entrance of the cave, Tang Huan suddenly turned to the right and flew out like a fire dragon, striking the wall. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! The strength chi frantically exploded, and a third hole immediately appeared on the wall. The moment the dust and sand gushed out behind the wall, Tang Huan also jumped into the newly created hole like lightning. At this moment, 3 ghost magic arrows soundlessly pierced through the hole at the side. Faintly, Tang Huan seemed to have caught a few curses that he had been suppressing with all his might, causing him to sneer to himself. If he had not made some changes just now, the instant he passed through the hole, he would not have been able to dodge them. He could only rely on the long spear in his hand to shoot down the most powerful specter arrows in front of him. Tang Huan was still able to endure a single specter arrows. 2. That was hard to say. Without waiting for his steps to be steady, Tang Huan used the sand in the sky to hide to the side. Behind the wall, there was a beautiful garden, flowers, plants, trees, pavilions, and it could be seen everywhere. And the mountain Tang Huan had chosen at that moment was an extremely exquisite fake mountain. Kai! The instant Tang Huan hid behind the fake mountain, an ordinary arrow shot over it like lightning, accompanied by a sharp whistling sound. After an earth-shattering boom, the terrifying power contained within the long arrow exploded. The fake mountain, several meters tall, immediately exploded into pieces, and even the surrounding vegetation was not spared as it was completely destroyed by the raging power. Dense dust and sand rolled and rose. In an instant, it had already filled up the space within a radius of over 10 meters. Chapter 438, Echoing the West. Kai! Another ordinary arrow came whistling through the air. This arrow came from a completely different direction than the previous one. Wherever the arrow passed by, it seemed to create a storm. When the long arrow pierced through the smoke and dust, the howling wind actually lifted all the dust and sand into the air. When the long arrow hit the wall, it caused a cloud of dust to rise up. However, the location of the fake mountain was now clear and bright. However, Tang Huan was already nowhere to be seen in that area. On another rock garden tens of meters away, a black-clothed man let out a soft sound of surprise. This man was only medium height, but he had an extremely robust build. His entire body was covered by a black robe, and even his head was covered by a hood. Only 2 eyes were revealed. Judging from the voice, the man in black was most likely an old man. The black costume old man carried a long sword on his waist and a black longbow in his hands. On his back, there was a long bow and the bowstring were all wrapped in black cloth. Not only were there 2 bows, but there were also 3 quivers tied to their backs. On the leftmost quiver, there were 3 pitch-black specter arrows. There were 8 ordinary arrows in the middle quiver, and there were 9 in the right quiver. However, what was strange was that the arrows in the quiver were not only longer than the arrows in the other 2 quivers, but they were also wrapped in black cloth. Within the cloth strip, there was a little bit of gold that was faintly discernible. At the moment, the black costume old man's eyes had an expression of unconcealable astonishment. 2 hawk-like gazes swept across the rock garden, and the scope of his eyes was quickly expanding. However, Tang Huan's figure was still not within his line of sight. It seemed to be the same as the fake mountain, reduced to smithereens under the arrow. Whoosh, whiz, whiz. The sound of clothes tearing through the air could be heard on the wall as 3 black shadows, just like Tang Huan, passed through the hole and entered the garden. A miserable scream suddenly sounded out. A black shadow suddenly flew out from the edge of the clump of trees and grasses that were dozens of meters away on the left. On the fake mountain, The black costume old man did not hesitate and immediately pulled out a normal arrow and shot out with his bow. A sharp whistling sound rang out, and in a split second, the sharp arrow brought along a violent storm as it flew into the lush vegetation. Bam! As the arrow fell to the ground, the strength chi swirled violently and a violent storm raged. The surrounding 10 meters of trees and grasses were completely destroyed. However, Tang Huan was still not seen in that area. The other 2 black-clothed men nearby quickly rushed over. It seemed like they had gained nothing as well, and the fellow that was thrown into the air before falling down was already lying on the ground motionlessly, obviously losing his life. Plop! A moment later, a subtle ringing sound could be heard again. A black-clothed man staggered a few steps before falling to the ground. He did not move, and from start to finish, he did not even have the time to let out a scream. At this point, of the 3 black-clothed men who had chased into the garden, only one was left. In the end, the only person that still had a look of shock on his face. In a few steps, he arrived in an open area. His face was pale, and his 2 eyes constantly moved. It was obvious that he was extremely nervous. At the fake mountain, the old man was also closely staring at the black-clothed man. However, after a long while, the man in black was safe and sound, and did not follow the footsteps of his 2 companions. This is bad. The black costume old man seemed to have thought of something. With a low growl, he jumped down from the fake mountain, but before his feet landed on the ground, his eyes narrowed. Within his pupils, a red light rapidly expanded and a sharp and scorching aura swept forth. It was as silent as the phantom arrow. The spear that was thrusting towards black costume old man was precisely the dragon and phoenix lance. Behind the spear, Tang Huan's expression was heavy, and his eyes flickered with dense coldness. Tang Huan, with a low growl, the longbow in the black costume old man's hand had already enveloped the red light. Bang! The red light slightly shifted, but immediately followed with a retract. The tip of the dragon and phoenix spear was actually hooked onto the bowstring. With just a tug, the bowstring broke. Black costume old man's body trembled, and his legs stepped on the ground, but right at this moment, the spear actually pierced over. Without hesitation, black costume old man threw the bow in his hand towards Tang Huan. With a clang sound, the sword at the old man's waist was unsheathed, and the 1-meter-long blade emitted a dazzling golden light, dazzling everyone who saw it. Clang! With a light push of the spear, the black longbow flew to the side. Kai! In the midst of the hissing sounds, Tang Huan's dragon and phoenix lance started to move, and started to release an extremely terrifying strength chi from the spear's body, as though it was trying to tear the surrounding space to shreds. On the tip of the spear, flames had already started to rise, and the heat wave was surging in all directions, releasing a series of popping sounds. Although Tang Huan did not use any offensive skills on this spear strike, the power it displayed was just as tyrannical. Black costume old man actually held onto the sword hilt with one hand, the other hand was holding onto the sword tip. He turned the sword towards the back and pushed out against the spear tip. The distance between the spear and the sword rapidly shortened. Buzz! But the moment the tip of the spear was about to land on the sword blade, a loud shake sounded out in the air. The dragon and phoenix spear twisted like a spirit serpent, and then suddenly sank down, going around the sword blade and piercing towards black costume old man's chest, revealing its extremely sharp spear light. The black costume old man's expression changed greatly. He had originally wanted to borrow Tang Huan's spear power to quickly increase the distance between the two of them, but he did not expect that Tang Huan would see through his plans and immediately change the spear's momentum. Not only did it cause his plans to disappear, it also caused him to be in danger. At this time, he had no other choice. Gritting his teeth, he leveled the sword body and pressed down fiercely, causing the strong genuine chi to emerge from his body and congeal in front of his abdomen. Clang! Spear and sword clashed. With a violent clanging sound, the spear paused for a moment. However, an extremely sharp spear light shot out from the tip of the spear and struck black costume old man's abdomen. After a bang sound, the spear light exploded, and the genuine chi that was condensed at Black Costume Old Man's abdomen vanished into thin air. Soon after, like a meteor that had been sent flying into the sky, he was struck right on the head by it, and his steps continuously retreated. Tang Huan's spear moved like lightning, taking advantage of the victory to give chase. However, halfway through thrusting the spear, he could not help but frown. His spear suddenly changed, and swept forward. Chapter 439. The old fatty appeared. Ding! A long sword shooting from the left was swept down by Tang Huan's dragon and phoenix spear. From the power contained within the arrow, Tang Huan could determine that the one who shot the arrow should be the archer who was a martial lord of the 8th stage. Before returning, Tang Huan was attacked by 3 archers and had quite a bit of fear in his heart. However, when they arrived at the garden that was filled with obstacles, Tang Huan did not pay much attention to the other 2. However, he also understood in his heart that with the other 2 archers in his way, it would not be easy for him to kill the strongest guy on the other side. Whoosh! In a blink of an eye, Tang Huan had given up on facing Black Costume Old Man who was retreating to the far left. At this time, Tang Huan had not only been circulating his 9 Yang Divine Furnace and 5 Colors Spiritual Pills to their limits, he was also displaying his flesh body to the fullest extent of his ability, as if he was a ferocious beast that had escaped its cage and was shuttling through the garden. The tyrannical perception ability allowed Tang Huan to catch the movements of the archer dozens of meters away, allowing him to dodge in advance. The archer continuously shot out several ordinary arrows, which all passed by Tang Huan's side. Even though he was at the absolute distance from Tang Huan every single time, it was still difficult to hit the target. Yet Tang Huan was closing in on the archer with a mind-boggling speed, so Tang Huan could vaguely see the black figure that he was hiding within the flowers. After another arrow missed, the archer couldn't stay any longer and jumped out of the flower bush, desperately rushing into the distance. Unfortunately, his speed was still much slower than Tang Huan's. He was dressed the same as Black Costume Old Man, and was completely wrapped in a black robe, revealing only 2 eyes. However, he only carried a bow and 2 quiver of arrows, and in one of the quiver, there were only 2 specter arrows, while in the other, there were only 5 ordinary arrows. In the blink of an eye, only a few meters remained between him and Tang Huan. At this time, not only did Tang Huan seem to be one with the world, the dragon and phoenix spears in his hands also seemed to have fused with the world, as he silently approached the black-clothed archer who was sprinting ahead. "Be careful!" Dozens of meters away, a low, vigorous shout suddenly rang out. Black Costume Old Man had already circled over from the side of the fake mountain, and upon seeing the situation, he immediately warned them. Hearing his shout, the archer subconsciously turned his head around, his eyes immediately revealing a terrified expression. Before, when he felt that there was no sound from behind him, he thought that they had already pulled apart the distance between them, but it was only now that he realized that the tip of Tang Huan's fiery red spear had actually already arrived before his eyes. "Ooh!" the archer screamed as his body was penetrated by the long spear. And it was also at this time that a bang sound rang out, and Tang Huan drew his long spear without even thinking before turning around to the right. In an instant, a sharp arrow whistled past where he had previously been standing, and before the archer had even landed on the ground, he was struck once again by the arrow's explosive force. Tang Huan stabilized his pace and turned to look back. Dozens of meters away, the Black Costume Old Man's eyes were extremely cold. Tang Huan frowned in surprise. 3 arrows, 1 in front and 1 just killed. Another had also entered the garden. A moment ago, Tang Huan had still sensed his aura a few dozen meters to the right of him, but the instant the archer of the 8th step was killed, his aura had completely disappeared. What replaced it was an even larger aura. Who was that? Just as that thought had emerged in Tang Huan's mind, he subconsciously glanced in that direction from the corner of his eyes. In a blink of an eye, Peng Shuo's figure entered his vision. "Old fatty!" Tang Huan shouted out with joy. The owner of the huge aura was the fat old man that he had promised to meet at the residence they were meeting today. In his hand was a black figure, and it was obvious that he was the third archer. He did not expect the old fatty to have such tyrannical strength, killing a great martial master who was at the peak of the seventh step without anyone noticing. If one could only judge from his aura, the old fatty's cultivation seemed to have surpassed the martial lord of the eighth step. Could it be that he was Stage 9 martial saint? Tang Huan's heart thumped. His mind couldn't help but think of these four shocking words. The old man who was just a blacksmith on the surface was the Stage 9 martial saint, the weapon refining grandmaster, and the old fatty who had opened a small weapon shop in the Furious Waves city was actually also the Stage 9 martial saint. Kid, be careful. Just as Tang Huan's thoughts were running fast, the fat old man suddenly shouted out. In the next moment, Tang Huan felt his scalp going numb, all the hair on his body stood up. He looked over. The black costume old man had already lost the black bow in his hand. He took off the other bow on his back. An arrow was already knocked onto the bow, and with the help of the genuine chi, the black cloth surrounding the bow and arrow was torn apart, releasing a bright and dazzling golden light. A feeling of extreme danger welled up from within Tang Huan's heart, and the spear in his hand fiercely thrust it out, the lance silhouette trembling out, a bit of red light appearing consecutively, instantly turning into a blazing fire, enveloping the space a few meters in front of him, causing heat to surge crazily. With Tang Huan's current cultivation and strength, it was countless times more powerful than before when he was using the Burning World style of the Flaming Rainbow Spear art. Bang! The bowstring trembled as it shook the earth. The moment the golden arrow left his hand, it released an even more brilliant light. A terrifying power surged out, and after a flick of his finger, the arrow seemed to transform into a golden storm. Like a sharp awl, it seemed as if it could destroy everything in its path, and even the space it passed through fluctuated violently. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom. In a split second, the golden storm had already passed through more than 10 meters of space, and forcefully collided with a raging prairie fire activated by Tang Huan's spear. In a moment, the sound of something exploding echoed in the air above the garden, and the berserk strength chi raged, instantly shattering the surrounding grass and trees, causing the dust on the ground to fly up into the air, gently floating in the air, causing the entire area to become hazy. Ding! In the next moment, the long spear and arrow pierced through the layers of strength chi and clashed together. After a sharp and clear sound passed, the arrow flew back 1 or 2 meters before dropping to the ground, but Tang Huan felt that his hands had become numb. The energy released by the golden arrow was not only berserk, but also contained a powerful intent, extremely sharp. Although that black costume old man was only at the peak of the 8th stage, the feeling he gave Tang Huan when he held the golden bow was completely different from before. It was as if the person standing there was no longer a martial lord of the 8th step, but a genuine Stage 9 martial saint. Chapter 440. 9 star beads. Bang! At this moment, the bowstring trembled once more. The sun spirit body had bestowed Tang Huan with an incomparably strong recovery ability. In a moment, his killing intent overflowed into the heavens. Tang Huan had impressively displayed the true flame rainbow spear technique style. An instant later, another golden storm the shape of a cone whizzed over, clashing once again with the terrifying power contained in the long spear. In an instant, strength chi went berserk. Ding! Immediately afterwards, the arrow clashed fiercely with the spear. Almost at the same instant this sharp and melodious sound exploded forth. The familiar sound of a bowstring rang through the air once again. Ho! The third cone-shaped golden storm roared as it approached. It was actually faster and more powerful. Wherever it passed, sand and rocks flew about, and the sky changed color. Seeing that, Tang Huan's face changed slightly. He had a feeling that what black costume old man was using right now was a terrifying battle skill. Each arrow was followed by an arrow, each arrow was faster than the last, and each arrow was stronger than the last. If Tang Huan was not mistaken, there were a total of 9 such arrows in his quiver. This very likely meant that Tang Huan was going to receive 9 of his arrows in a row. The arrows were like a string of beads. On the third arrow, They already possessed such tyrannical might, and on the ninth arrow, how terrifying would their power be? He never thought that the secluded Night Divine Palace would have such a powerful archer. If the secluded Night Divine Palace had sent this peak 8th stage archer out of Crescent City, Tang Huan would not even have had the chance to use the Grandmaster insignia this old man had left behind. Tang Huan didn't even have the time to use his battle skill. He had already activated both the genuine Qi and the genuine Qi, thrusting out his spear. But just at this time, a thunderbolt suddenly flashed in Tang Huan's mind, and a thought started to grow in him crazily. Arrows like a chain of beads, a chain of 9 arrows. Could it be the 9 star links? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom. The moment the powerful cry came out, Tang Huan suddenly realized that the arrows used by the black costume old man in front of him was exactly the same as the golden arrows he saw in the depths of the sword crafting valley. Zhuge Yan. He was actually Zhuge Yan. 9 star links. This is the 9 star linked pearl. Tens of meters away, fat old man's expression changed drastically. The fat on his face trembled, and his pair of small eyes were uncontrollably wide open. The archery technique of the 9 star linked pearl had been passed down in the human clan for many years. Many aristocratic families and families had this archery cultivation method. However, it was extremely difficult to master the art of archery. The last person who had mastered this archery to the mastery stage was a human clan from 150 years ago. When he stepped into the stage 9 martial saint realm, as long as he had a bow and arrow, he would be invincible in the stage 9. It was said that the reason the previous demon lord, Burning Heaven, could not leave his hiding place was because of that human clan. After the stage 9 archer disappeared, only one person in Glory Continent succeeded in cultivating the 9 star linked pearl technique. He was the Shalong Empire's General Zhuge Yan. Zhuge Yan was only at the peak of the 8th step. With the 9 star linked pearl technique, he could easily match up to a stage 9 ranker. It was said that the reason why the Flaming Phoenix King, one of the 8 great demon kings, had suffered such heavy injuries in the Great War of the Two Realms plain was because of Zhuge Yan's archery skills. Only Zhuge Yan is proficient in the 9 star linked pearl technique in Glory Continent. Could this person be Zhuge Yan? The 10,000 generals of the Shalong Empire are actually mixed with the secluded Night Divine Palace, or could it be that secluded Night Divine Palace has assassins who have mastered such powerful archery, but no one knows about it? Fat old man's mind raced, his small eyes flashed with anger. After a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "Damn, I can only give it my all now." In the instant that his voice fell, a fire-red long spear appeared out of nowhere in his fat right palm. It was crystal clear, shiny like jade, and its gorgeous luster was like flowing water. It flowed around the spear's body, overflowing with color, as if it contained a power that could captivate one's mind. Buzz! In the next moment, an intense and clear tremble suddenly resounded in the garden. Dazzling fiery red light crazily blossomed from the long spear, and an extremely terrifying aura fluctuated like a violent storm, rolling in all directions. Then, ripples appeared in the air that could be seen with the naked eye. At the same time, within the fire-red long spear, an incomparably terrifying spear intent overflowed, instantly seemingly congealing into substance, and shooting up into the sky. Po! An extremely strong wave of pressure swept out in all directions like a storm, immediately enveloping an area of 1,000 meters. In that moment, black costume old man who had his bow nocked with arrows was stunned. Tang Huan, who had taken a step back in preparation for the 4th arrow, was also stunned. When the old fatty first appeared, he didn't have any weapon in his hand. But now, not only did he have a long spear in his hands, but the spear also erupted with a terrifying spear intent. Divine armament. It's definitely the divine armament. Tang Huan's eyes opened wide. A violent storm was stirred in his chest. If he had not seen Shen Shan's peacock plume in Maze Realm Forest, it would be difficult for him to make a decision. But now, he could practically determine that the long spear in the old fatty's hand was actually a divine armament. That was because the spear also possessed a mysterious aura that could only be understood but not conveyed. Tang Huan had only felt such an aura from the peacock plume before. At this moment, Tang Huan couldn't help but think of the spear intent that Shen Guan, Gu Yi, Tang Zhuang and the others felt inside and outside the Crescent City. At that time, Tang Huan was under the Spectre Magic Arrow and did not feel the existence of the spear intent, but he had heard them explain it in detail. Allegedly, among the divine weapon catalog, there were only 3 spear-type divine armaments, and the ones that were forged were only the flowing rainbow spear. And according to Shen Guan and the rest, the expert who activated the terrifying spear intent and then disappeared without a trace was most likely the spear saint Yi Chongshan, who had disappeared for many years. Tang Huan deeply felt that this was the case, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of doubt in his heart. This was because he was actually cultivating Yi Chongshan's true flaming rainbow spear technique. He had even thought that there was some sort of relationship between Yi Chongshan and himself. Otherwise, why would he suddenly appear when he was in danger? Right now, the spear in the old fatty's hand was extremely similar to the spear formed from the spear intent that Shen Guan and the others saw inside Crescent City. In this way, his identity was obvious. Yi Chongshan, Spear Saint Yi Chongshan. Suddenly, a panicked roar came out, and from 10 meters away, the black costume old man's eyes revealed a look of fear. You are Spear Saint Yi Chongshan. Chapter 441, Rainbow Spear. On the 3rd floor of Divine Weapon Pavilion, Shen Guan, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes, and in the next moment, he appeared in front of the window and looked towards the eastern part of Heavenly Forging City. That is, in the depth of Shen Guan's eyes, he could not help but reveal a surprised look. Spear intent. Such familiar spear intent. Although he was too far away and could only sense the slight aura coming from there, that aura made him feel very familiar with it. In a blink of an eye, the incident outside Origin Continent came back to mind. Yi Chongshan. The 3 characters appeared in his mind. Shen Guan did not hesitate. He immediately went through the window and jumped down from the 3rd floor, and with an astonishing speed, he rushed towards the east of Heavenly Forging City. Almost at the same time, in the Heavenly Spirit Hall behind the Divine Weapon Pavilion, the skinny black costume old man seemed to wake up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes. Divine armament? A sound that was as thin as gossamer echoed in palace, but immediately after, the old man closed his eyes again. Flowing rainbow spear. In the depths of Glory's sacred temple, in a quiet and elegant hall, an incomparably surprised exclamation suddenly sounded out. Immediately afterwards, a figure flashed out of the hall like a ghost. With a single leap, it landed lightly on the several-meter-tall Eve Bud. It was a tall woman in white with white hair. She was extremely beautiful and did not look old at all. She looked to be in her 30s. Is that Big Brother Yi? The woman in white looked to the east and her lips started trembling. Her eyes revealed an uncontrollable excitement. However, a moment later, her eyebrows twitched. The excitement in her eyes had been replaced by anger. This old thing has disappeared for so many years, and he still dares to come out. Whoosh! In the next moment, the woman in white was like a cloud as she flew swiftly in the direction of her return residence. In an instant, she had left this continuously rising and falling palace. Spear Saint Yi Chongshan. In an exquisite courtyard behind Xinghai Pavilion, a burly old man in a green robe puzzledly frowned. It's said that when Tang Huan was assassinated outside the Crescent City, he used the flowing rainbow spear to activate his spear intent, but it quickly disappeared without a trace. Now, in this Heavenly Forging City, why is he using such a terrifying spear intent again? Could it be that he is fighting with a certain Stage 9 martial saint? As the mutterings faded, the old man took a step forward. He was already 10 meters away. What happened there? This is too scary. What's over there? Damn, I was almost scared to death. When they returned to their residence, The numerous martial warriors looked towards the direction of the garden in alarm and doubt. That terrifying pressure swept out like a hurricane, causing the crowd's hearts to tremble wherever it passed. The stronger one's cultivation was, the deeper one's perception of the pressure that had suddenly surged forth. Furthermore, in various parts of Heavenly Forging City that were further away, those rankers who were either on the surface or in the dark, were all alarmed at the same time. Following which, several figures rushed back to their residence. Inside the garden at the side of the residence they had returned, Tang Huan looked at the old fatty with eyes full of surprise. The roar of the black costume old man who was suspected to be Zhuge Yan made Tang Huan even more certain that the old fatty was undoubtedly the stage 9 martial saint who had become famous 100 years ago. This old man's flowing rainbow spear has not seen blood for dozens of years. Today, an exception might have to be made. The fat old man gently stroked the shining fire-red long spear in his palms, the excited trembling sounds rising and falling, as if she was responding to the words that he had just said. Gulp. The golden bow and black costume old man's hands immediately turned towards fat old man, swallowing a mouthful of saliva with difficulty, and his hands slightly trembled. The fat old man squinted his eyes and walked towards the black costume old man as if he was strolling in the park. His footsteps were soundless, but it felt as if an incomparable pressure was engulfing the black costume old man, causing him to retreat a step for every step he took. Not long later, black costume old man was already several meters away. The fear in his eyes became even stronger, and the trembling of the hands holding onto the bow became even stronger. When fat old man took another step forward, he could no longer hold it in and actually turned around and escaped out of the garden with all his might. "Do you think you can escape?" The fat old man chuckled, but did not give chase. Hearing the voice from behind, the black costume old man's speed increased once again. Seeing that, Tang Huan's eyes flashed a look of surprise. He had already vaguely realized that the old fatty's situation was not right. However, the extremely strong perception ability told Tang Huan that the reason the spear intent was weakening was not because the old fatty was restraining it himself, but because the spear intent was weakening. This meant that, for the old fatty to continue maintaining that level of terrifying spear intent, it was already insufficient strength. Whoosh! In just a few breaths of time, the black costume old man had already rushed out of the garden and out of his sight. Tang Huan did not bother to chase after him. In 2 or 3 steps he was already in front of fat old man. "Old fatty, you!" Tang Huan was shocked. "I'll be leaving first. If you don't want me to die in an ugly way, then don't say anything. In a few days, I'll come find you." After he finished speaking, the fat old man turned around and sped off into the distance. He chose a different direction from the black costume old man. "Old fatty, Tang Huan subconsciously took 2 steps forward, wanting to call fat old man to stop. However, the moment the words were about to reach his mouth, he swallowed them all and stopped in his tracks. The moment he stopped, the fat old man disappeared very quickly. The last time he was outside the Crescent City, the old fatty had also activated the flowing rainbow spear's spear intent and suddenly disappeared. This time, the old fatty had also left the place in a hurry, and by doing so, it was obvious that he did not want others to discover his whereabouts. As for the reason, Tang Huan thought back to the unusual reaction the old fatty showed just now, and uncontrollably a bewildered expression emerged on his face. After the old fatty activated spear intent, the situation did not look good. Could it be that using the flowing rainbow spear's spear intent had very serious side effects? Or had he suffered some sort of injury before, and his strength was no longer enough to execute the divine armament's flowing rainbow spear? These 2 possibilities, it seemed the latter had a higher chance of success. Yi Changshan. Just as Tang Huan was thinking, a loud voice exploded in between heaven and earth. Chapter 442, Shanlan. That voice was like a thunderclap, rumbling as it came from afar, and the note contained a strong sense of anger. The moment he heard the shout, Tang Huan felt an incomparably majestic imposing aura, like a surging wave, roaring and rushing over. In an instant, The garden seemed to have turned into a violently churning ocean, a terrifying pressure that seemed to grind people into fine powder. Tang Huan's heart trembled. From the aura, he could determine that the person who came was powerful, and was most likely a martial saint of the peak stage 9. In a moment of Tang Huan's thought, the 9 Yang divine furnace and the 5 colors spiritual pills were already madly revolving, and a strong imposing manner immediately roared out from their body. However, it did not spread far, but continuously lingered around them, resisting the pressure that was as vast as the ocean. A low cry of surprise sounded out, and immediately after, a white figure appeared in Tang Huan's line of sight. A moment ago, that figure had just appeared on a rooftop several tens of meters away, but it didn't even take a blink of an eye for him to arrive in front of Tang Huan. With a distance of less than 3 meters, the person who arrived was actually a white-clothed female with snow-white hair, who had a rather young and beautiful complexion. However, Tang Huan could feel that this woman was only a beauty. She was definitely not young at all. "Who are you?" The white-clothed female frowned slightly, and quickly sized Tang Huan up before her gaze landed on the dragon and phoenix spear in Tang Huan's hands. "I am Tang Huan, greetings senior." Tang Huan cupped his hands and said in a neither humble nor arrogant manner, "You are Tang Huan?" The lady in white's expression eased up a little and said, "Did you kill all of these secluded Night Divine Palace assassins?" "Exactly." Tang Huan nodded and smiled. Of the corpses left in the garden, 2 of them were archers. They still had a few phantom arrows left on them. As long as they could identify these arrows, they would be able to quickly determine the identities of the corpses. "You're lying," the woman in white sneered. "Elder." Tang Huan remained calm, but his heart skipped a beat, and he immediately started to explain. But before he finished speaking, the white-clothed female pointed to the body lying on the ground a few meters away and said, "The other killers died by your hands. He was the only one. There was no way you could have killed him." The person the lady in white was referring to was the archer who died in the hands of the fat old man. The other killers had all died under Tang Huan's dragon and phoenix spear, their bodies clearly marked with marks. But this archer's body did not have any injuries. This was the biggest flaw. "Senior, you're right. I actually forgot about this person." Tang Huan thought about it and then laughed. "This assassin did indeed die to another senior. The spear intent activated by that senior is just too powerful." This junior was originally guessing his identity, but after hearing the name senior just called out earlier, this junior realized he should be the Spear Saint Yi Chongshan. "I never thought that we would meet the old man from the Spear Saint here." Supposedly, the true flaming rainbow spear technique this junior cultivates comes from Senior Spear Saint. As he finished speaking, Tang Huan's eyes were filled with reverence and worship. "Enough, stop pretending." However, the lady in white did not hold back and poked Tang Huan. "Where did Yi Chongshan go?" "Amongst those secluded Night Divine Palace assassins, one of the archers that was able to use the 9-star-linked pearl escaped over there." Senior Yi chased after him. Tang Huan laughed awkwardly. He then raised his hand and pointed towards the direction of black costume old man. 9-star-linked pearl?" The lady in white frowned, her gaze landing on the golden arrows that were dozens of meters away. She stared straight at Tang Huan. "Where did he really go?" "That's right." Tang Huan nodded without hesitation. "All right." The woman in white nodded, then suddenly sped away in the opposite direction. "Senior, you walked the wrong path." Seeing that, Tang Huan was stunned for a moment before recovering, and anxiously shouted out. The direction she was heading towards was in the direction of where the old fatty had left to. However, the white-clothed female acted as if she didn't hear his shout at all. She was as quick as lightning, and in the time it took to snap a finger, she had already disappeared. "What is the identity of this woman?" Tang Huan's face changed slightly. Although he had only spoken a few words to her, Tang Huan had already understood how powerful she was. An incomparably tyrannical power, just one of a kind. What made Tang Huan even more dejected was that, as if she could read minds, she could actually see through his lies. This caused Tang Huan to be extremely worried. Judging from her shout when she appeared, There seemed to be a deep grudge between her and the old fatty. With the old fatty's current condition, once he fell into her hands, how could he still be alive? Earlier, when the old fatty was fleeing in a hurry, could it be that he was worried about encountering this woman? Thinking about it, Tang Huan became even more worried. He moved and chased after the lady in white. Tang Huan stopped chasing, but just as Tang Huan ran out more than 10 meters, a low shout resounded in his ears. Tang Huan stopped subconsciously and turned around. A tall figure appeared in the garden in a flash. It was the great clan elder of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, Shen Guan. Grand Elder? Suspicion flashed across Tang Huan's eyes. Tang Huan, do you know who that was? Shen Guan's expression was a little strange. Without waiting for Tang Huan's reply, he smiled and said, her surname is Shan and her name is Shan Lan. Shan Lan? Tang Huan was startled. Could it be that the senior also glorifies the descendants of the sacred emperor? At that age, even if she was the same age as Shan, and was also a descendant of the sacred emperor, she would definitely be Shan's elder. She isn't a descendant of the Saint King, she's the sister of the Saint King. Shen Guan laughed involuntarily. Sister. Tang Huan was slightly shocked. Then isn't she over 100 years old? Her age was actually older than Tang Huan had guessed. Little sister of the Saint King's mountain and river. Then wouldn't she be a character of the same generation as that old fatty? The old fatty had the flowing rainbow spear forged by the sacred emperor, and he had an extremely high status in the Glory Empire. Not only did he know Shan Lan, he was probably very familiar with him. If that was the case, why were the two of them still in the same boat? That's right. Senior Shan Lan and Senior Yi Chongshan's relationship is a little complicated, so there's no need for us to get involved. It's more complicated. Could it be that they were once lovers? An extremely bold idea popped out of Tang Huan's mind. Hearing Shen Guan's words, he suddenly came to a realization that when Shan Lan talked about the old fatty, he was not only infuriated, but also spoke with dense resentment. Chapter 443, Li Dai Tao Dian. Tang Huan, did any of the killers from Secluded Night Divine Palace escape? Shen Guan's voice interrupted Tang Huan's imagination. He looked over, and saw that the smile on the great clan elder's face had completely disappeared, and there were dense dark clouds over his eyebrows. The Secluded Night Divine Palace killer had infiltrated into the Heavenly Forging City to assassinate Tang Huan, and he was truly furious. Secluded Night Divine Palace has sent 8 assassins, 3 of them are archers. Tang Huan collected his thoughts. There are only 2 killers who managed to escape. One is a normal martial warrior with the strength of the 8th step, and the other is an archer who is a peak of the 8th step and is proficient in the 9-star linked pearl technique. It is fortunate that Senior Yi suddenly appeared and scared him away, otherwise, my life would really be in danger. Tang Huan did not immediately reveal his guesses about the identity of the black costume old man. Furthermore, the last words he said, held back about his own strength. If the old fatty did not appear, Tang Huan believed that with his own abilities, under the complete 9-star arrows technique, he would be able to keep his life. However, it was inevitable that he would receive a heavy injury. With the distance between them, the archer's advantage was too obvious. Moreover, the person who used the bow and arrow was a martial lord who was at the peak of the 8th step. Such an opponent would definitely be able to kill the stage 9 martial saint, and an ordinary peak of the 8th step martial lord would probably be easily killed. It was already shocking enough that Tang Huan was able to survive under the 9-star beads. 9-star linked pearl? Hearing these 4 words, Shen Guan's expression changed greatly. Someone actually managed to cultivate the technique of 9-star linked pearl in the hands of the arrow of the Secluded Night Divine Palace. In a moment, Shen Guan snorted, his eyebrows filled with anger. This Secluded Night Divine Palace is truly lawless. To actually dare to assassinate within the Heavenly Forging City. This old man will definitely not let go of those 2. They can escape from here, but it won't be that easy to escape from Heavenly Forging City. Brother Shen, I have caught them and brought them here. A laughter like Hongzong rang out, and in a moment, a figure shuttled through the broken walls, striding towards them with large strides. It was a muscular old man dressed in green robes, holding a person in one hand. "Oh, it's our brother from Starflight. Well done." Shen Guan clapped his hands and laughed. Plop, plop. The blue-robed elder called astronauts casually tossed them out, and the two of them landed on the ground like dead dogs, not moving an inch. The two of them were both dressed in black, and the middle-aged man in black who did not wear a hood was precisely the guy who Tang Huan let go of a horse and left behind to attract the attention of the archers, in order to achieve his goal of ambushing their enemies. As for the other person, at first glance, Tang Huan frowned. Although he was wearing a hood, a black robe, with 3 quiver of arrows tied to his back and a golden bow hung on his body, he was clearly taller than the black costume old man from before. Furthermore, his body was not as muscular as the man he was previously. "Tang Huan, is something wrong?" Shen Guan was keenly aware of the change in Tang Huan's expression. "This person is probably a fake." Tang Huan lowered his voice and said, "The archer that escaped should be around 50 to 60 years old, and the one that Senior Xinghe captured is probably only around 30 to 40 years old." Starflight took off that guy's hood, revealing a rather square face. He was indeed quite young, no more than 40 years old. "What a cunning thing." "Brother Shen, I'll look for it again." Starflight was furious. Her figure flashed, and she was already out of the garden. Shen Guan's sharp eyes swept across the two black-clothed men. His eyes squinted slightly and muttered to himself, 56 years old, proficient in 9-star links. Could it be? Could he? Impossible, impossible. How could he be mixed up with the secluded Night Divine Palace? "Tang Huan, are you suspecting him as well?" After a while, Shen Guan's gaze suddenly landed on Tang Huan. "When I was at Fengming Mountain, I killed 2 of the sons of the Xiaolong Empire's commander, Hong Liang, but he was actually one of the thousands of generals under Hong Liang's command. Most importantly, I met him once in the Dragon Spring town, and his figure is extremely similar to the assassin today." Tang Huan slowly said. If Tang Huan had revealed that person's identity at the beginning, it would not have been very convincing. But now that Shen Guan had guessed it himself, what Tang Huan had said just now was naturally even more convincing. This old man understands. Shen Guan took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "Tang Huan, don't spread this matter to the outside world yet." But right after, he started laughing coldly. The tone in his voice suddenly changed. "However, since he dares to come to this heavenly forging city and do as he pleases, this old man will definitely make him pay the price." Taking advantage of the fact that there were still not many martial warriors in the vicinity, Tang Huan quietly left the garden. As for the aftermath, naturally, there would be Divine Weapon Pavilion to handle it. After returning to the Wonder Artifact Hall, Tang Huan asked Peng Bo to send the weapons that he had forged these past few days to the Spirit Feather Merchant Guild while he brought the little girl and Zhao Budian back to their residence in the Four Seas Inn. Within the Heavenly Forging City, countless people knew that he lived there. It was not difficult for the old fatty to find him. In the next few days, other than going to Starsea Restaurant, Tang Huan never went out of his house. On the other hand, the assassination attempt that they had made and the powerful spear intent that the old fatty had instigated, had spread like wildfire throughout the Heavenly Forging City, turning into a topic of conversation among the other martial warriors over the course of a few days. Tang Huan did not go to the Divine Weapon Pavilion to ask Zhuge Yan if his archer had been caught, nor did he pay attention to how the Divine Weapon Pavilion handled the aftermath. Tang Huan felt that after Zhuge Yan played a trick, the Divine Weapon Pavilion's chances of catching him were already slim. Most importantly, even if Divine Weapon Pavilion managed to catch Zhuge Yan, he would be helpless to do anything about it. If he did not capture Zhuge Yan on the spot, it would be impossible to prove that he was the archer who had participated in the assassination attempt. He believed that he would not be so foolish as to leave a mark on the bow. Of course, for Tang Huan, whether he managed to catch Zhuge Yan or not, it did not matter. Now that he had escaped, Tang Huan would use his own method in the future to make him pay the price. Right now, what Tang Huan wanted to know the most was the old fatty's situation. Had Shan Lan found him or not? When would he find this courtyard? If this mystery was not solved, Tang Huan would feel as if his heart was being scratched by a cat. Another day passed, and the night gradually deepened. In the room, Zhao Budian, who had just finished eating a large pile of gems, had a round stomach and was sleeping soundly, while the little girl was absorbing the energy of the spiritual fire day and night. In the next room, Tang Huan heaved a long sigh of relief, and in the midst of the intense ringing sound, the dragon and phoenix spear released many brilliant lights that intertwined with each other, shining brilliantly. The second spirit channel at the place where the tip of the spear met the body was also filled with the solidified gold gemstone solution. Chapter 444, Big Loss. Right now, the dragon and phoenix spear had been upgraded from a high-leveled weapon to a heavenly grade armament. Tang Huan had hidden 2 of his Sumeru magical rings, and they were all left behind by this old man in the forging god cave. The remaining one was sent over by the Star Ocean Commerce this morning, along with the golden cauldron stone. A large number of other high-grade gems were also delivered. A few days ago, Tang Huan went to Star Ocean Commerce for the golden cauldron stone and to get some food for Zhao Budian. Originally, Tang Huan was going to help Star Ocean Commerce forge more high-quality heavenly grade armament in exchange for gold cauldron stone and other high-grade gems. However, Xing Yan did not agree. After collecting the large amount of gems, he directly sent them to Tang Huan's residence without paying any money. Tang Huan knew that Star Ocean Commerce would definitely be able to make a huge profit out of the previous 98 heavenly grade armament. Seeing that Xing Yan was adamant, Tang Huan did not argue and accepted it all. Tang Huan's right hand moved slightly, and casually thrust it out with the dragon and phoenix spear, forming a blazing storm in the room. The terrifying might filled the entire space. But after a moment, the long spear in Tang Huan's hand stopped, the luster had disappeared grayly, and the might had also disappeared without a trace in an instant. Following that, Tang Huan's gaze turned towards the window several meters away, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. "Old fatty, you finally came." Creak. Amidst the light ringing, the window was suddenly opened and a ball of meat rolled in. It was a fat old man. The moment he entered the room, the old man unceremoniously sat on the only chair in the room. His 2 small eyes sized up Tang Huan's dragon and phoenix lance carefully, laughing. "Boy, this spear is not bad. It truly is worthy of being a leveling weapon. No matter how good the weapon is, it cannot compare to the divine armament's flowing rainbow spear." Tang Huan also carefully sized up fat old man, and said while beaming, "Should I continue to call you old fatty, or senior spear saint?" They hadn't seen each other for a few days, but the old fatty seemed to have recovered from a serious illness. His face was pale, and he was even panting a little. "What spear saint? Why don't you continue calling me old fatty?" Fat old man smiled awkwardly. "Old fatty, are you alright?" Tang Huan frowned slightly. He had felt the aura from the fat old man carefully and found that it was extremely weak. "He won't die yet." Fat old man snickered, and then patted his head in annoyance. "That day, I was too anxious. I forgot that you had already condensed the sun spirit body." Sigh. "Even if I, the fat grandpa, do not do anything, you little rascal will not die. At most, you will only receive some injuries. With your sun spirit body, no matter how heavy your injuries are, as long as you still have a breath, you can recover." But that guy is different. He is still a peak martial lord of the 8th step. After using the 9-star arrows technique, he will definitely be severely injured, and at that time, I can easily kill him. It's a loss. We've lost a lot. The fat old man's analysis was indeed reasonable, but no matter how it was heard, it felt weird. She unhappily rolled her eyes, and then said worriedly, "Old fatty, could it be that you really were severely injured before, and have not recovered even now?" The old fatty was Spear Saint Yi Chongshan, who had already become famous throughout the world 100 years ago. However, what he had said just now revealed a piece of information, and that was that when Zhuge Yan had executed the 9-star arrows, the old fatty did not seem to have the power to kill him. Back then, Zhuge Yan had been so frightened that he had run away. However, the old fatty had neither attacked nor gave chase. This was clear evidence of this. You guessed right. The old fatty did not hide it. and said helplessly, I, the fat grandpa, have indeed received heavy injuries, and am no longer able to use the divine armament's flowing rainbow spear. Although I can barely activate the spear intent, it doesn't last long. If we really started fighting that day, I would have been forced to run away. Saying that, Fat Old Man smirked at Tang Huan and said smilingly, luckily that guy was scared out of his wits. It seems like my reputation as the fat grandpa is still valid. Hearing his words, Tang Huan couldn't laugh at all. Although he had guessed that the old fatty's situation was like this, when he heard it out loud with his own ears, he couldn't help but feel shocked. The old fatty was the strongest person in this world and was extremely powerful. To forcefully activate the spear intent of the flowing rainbow spear, there will definitely be some side effects. Tang Huan frowned, his eyes revealing an apologetic look. No worries, you'll be able to recover after a short rest. Fat Old Man waved his hand and said. The old fatty spoke in a casual manner. Of course, Tang Huan would not believe him. However, he knew that even if he continued to ask, the old fatty would not divulge the truth. In the next moment, Tang Huan took a light breath and asked, Old fatty, how did you get this injury? This was 80 years ago. Let's not talk about it. Fat Old Man shook her head and sighed. A look of reminiscence flashed across her pair of tiny eyes. 80 years ago? Tang Huan took a deep breath and said in shock, Old fatty, you have been injured for 80 years and you have yet to recover? Not to mention 80 years, even on the day of my death, I won't be able to treat this wound. Fat Old Man did not mind and laughed. But I don't believe that there are wounds that cannot be healed in this world. Tang Huan said seriously, I can't cure it right now, but it's because no one has the ability to do so. Kid, you're right. The Fat Old Man looked at Tang Huan in surprise, and said, if I, the fat grandpa, wanted to recover from my injuries, it would be easy to say it's easy, but hard to say it's hard. If there is an expert who has exceeded the cultivation level of the stage 9 martial saint in helping out, then it will naturally be easy for me to recover from my injuries, otherwise, it will be impossible for me to survive for the rest of my life. If that's the case, then it's simple. Hearing this, Tang Huan smiled slightly. Old fatty, you just need to wait patiently for me to cross the stage 9. Brat, you're quite ambitious. Hearing Tang Huan's words, Fat Old Man was stunned, but he immediately laughed heartily. However, you have to hurry up. If it took you another 10 or so years before you could surpass stage 9 martial saint, then I, the fat grandpa, would have already lived underground. Old fatty, you. Tang Huan's heart skipped a beat. His face changed slightly. Didn't Fat Old Man say that he only had a few dozen years left to live? In that instant, a sense of urgency involuntarily rose in Tang Huan's heart. He had practically been watched by his master and Fat Old Man since he was young. Even though he was speaking to Fat Old Man shamelessly, in his heart, he had already become his family. How could Tang Huan watch him walk step by step towards death? Chapter 445. Mother's news. Don't think too much into it. Life and death depend on fate. I, the fat grandpa, have lived for more than 100 years. Even if I die right now, I would have no regrets. Without waiting for Tang Huan to finish speaking, Fat Old Man smiled and interrupted him. Brat, you've waited so long for me, the fat grandpa, and you don't want to ask me anything else? Old fatty, I do have a very important question to ask you. Hearing that, Tang Huan calmed his emotions and said seriously, Oh? Fat Old Man raised his eyebrow. The two mouse eyes started to spin. Tell me, what is the problem? Brat, don't expect too much from me. There are many things that even I, the fatty, do not know. As if he had guessed what Tang Huan wanted to ask, Fat Old Man gave a reminder. You must know that. Tang Huan's expression was solemn. After brewing for a moment, he took a deep breath and said, Old fatty, the Holy Emperor and His Majesty's sister, Senior Shan Lan, are you your old lover? What? Fat Old Man obviously did not expect Tang Huan to suddenly ask this, and he was stunned. His small eyes opened wide, but after a moment, he regained his senses and fiercely glared at Tang Huan. What old lover? Kid, where did you hear all this nonsense? Old fatty, Are you getting angry from embarrassment? Tang Huan snickered. Go, kid, if you keep talking nonsense like that, I'm going to leave. Fat old man was a little angry and acted as if he was going to attack. Don't go, let's get down to business. Tang Huan immediately smiled and pushed Fat old man onto a chair. Although Fat old man did not answer the question just now, Tang Huan already knew the answer through his reaction. Back then, Fat old man and Shanlan definitely did have that kind of relationship. In the next moment, Tang Huan gazed at the fat old man, and said solemnly, "Old fatty, is my mother still alive?" When he said these words, Tang Huan couldn't help but become a little nervous, and even his heartbeat seemed to increase by a lot. He had only used the empty grave outside the Furious Waves city to deduce that his mother was not dead. But that was only his deduction, and without knowing the exact answer, Tang Huan found it hard to calm down. Didn't you already guess it? Fat old man didn't seem to have calmed down. He leaned back in his chair and rolled his eyes. My mother really didn't die. Tang Huan's face immediately changed. Excitement surged from the bottom of his heart. He then grabbed onto Fat old man's sturdy arm and anxiously asked, "Old fatty, do you know where she went?" "She went to the Holy Spirit continent." The fat old man snorted twice. Holy Spirit continent? Tang Huan was stunned for a moment, and then asked with great surprise, "Holy Spirit continent? That is Tian clan's territory. Is my mother from Tian clan?" "I don't know about this, fat grandpa." Fat old man squinted his eyes. Tang Huan was stunned, and couldn't help but ask, "Then what about my father? Who was he?" According to the memories Tang Huan had inherited, he and his mother had depended on each other since childhood, but he had almost no impression of his father at all. In the past few decades, he had always thought that he was the illegitimate child, and did not know that his father was someone else. It was because of this reason that Tang Huan, whose soul had been attached to this body, had a deep relationship with his mother and treated both the old man and the old fatty as family. However, Tang Huan did not have much of a feeling towards his father, who he had never met before, and only wanted to know who he really was. "Then I'll have to ask your mother." "How would I know?" the fat old man said casually, his eyes flashing with a cunning light. "You." Tang Huan was a little depressed. He wanted to reach his hands into the fat old man's stomach and take out everything he said. He could feel that the old fatty definitely knew something, but since he didn't say it, Tang Huan had no other choice. No, perhaps there was a way to try. "Old fatty, you really don't know?" Tang Huan rolled his eyes and laughed a little weirdly. "I really don't know." Fat old man immediately shook his head. The fat on his face was trembling, but when he saw Tang Huan smile, he had a bad premonition. "Sigh, what a pity." Tang Huan sighed and said with a hopeless expression, "Looks like I can only go to the Glory Sacred Temple and ask Senior Shanlan. She might know something." "It's not too late now. The Glory Sacred Temple shouldn't have closed yet. Let's go now, maybe we can still go in." "She knows nothing." Hearing that, fat old man's fat body trembled, and grabbed onto Tang Huan. "Brat, I concede. However, I do not know who your father is, but your master should know of the situation. When your master comes back, you can ask him." "This old man still doesn't know when he'll be back." Tang Huan felt a headache. "Brat, don't be too anxious. I once heard from old Manu that he had to go to sea to find a very rare saint-grade gem to forge his divine armament. He would probably only be able to return in 3 or 4 years. Old Manu is not like me. He is a genuine stage 9 martial saint, a real weapon refining grandmaster. There are not many people in this world that can hurt him. Boy, just relax for 100 times." Fat old man laughed, but a hint of worry that was difficult to detect flashed across his narrowed eyes. "To see? In that case, we can only wait." Tang Huan's face revealed a smile. It didn't matter if he had to wait for another 1 or 2 years. He was initially worried for the old man's safety, but after hearing fat old man's words, he felt a lot more relieved. "Old fatty, then let's talk about my mother. Is she really from Tian clan?" Tang Huan smiled as he looked at fat old man, like a cunning little fox. "Kid, I really don't know. Anyway, in the past few years, I have never seen your mother reveal her wings, Fat Old Man said with a sullen face. He did not reveal his wings. Could it be that he is from the Tian clan's royal clan? Tang Huan doubtfully muttered. It seemed that the royal family of the Tian clan had methods to conceal their wings, just like the princess of the Tian clan called Leng Yinshuang. Before your mother left the Furious Waves City, she once said that she would go to the Holy Spirit Continent's Cloud City to find someone. If you have the chance in the future, you might as well go to the Tian clan to find that person, Fat Old Man added. Who is that person? Tang Huan subconsciously asked. Xing Meng. Fat Old Man slowly said these two words. Tian clan? Tang Huan was startled. Exactly. Fat Old Man giggled. Brat. This is all I know about Grandpa Fatty. Woo. Don't even think about going to Holy Spirit Continent right now. You're still not strong enough. Go to Tian clan at this time. Forget about if those Tian clan people would make a move against you. Even if they did not, you would not be able to see Xing Meng. I heard that the old lady has not appeared for 200 to 300 years. Of course, when you get the peak stage 9's cultivation to go again, it would be much easier to meet Xing Meng. So, what you need to do now is to cultivate honestly and enter the Heavenly Spirit secret realm. That way you don't have to worry about the assassination of secluded Night Divine Palace. Old Fatty, there's no need to wait for the future. I will set off tomorrow and travel to Origin Continent, Tang Huan said with a face full of smiles. What? Fat Old Man was immediately dumbfounded. Chapter 446. You're a pig. Yeah. It was evening, and the sky above the vast forest was filled with a blue shadow flying at a breakneck speed. A crisp sound echoed throughout the forest from time to time. This blue figure was indeed Blue Dragon Zhao Budian, and on his body that was more than 2 meters long, 6 wings extended out. When each wing was stretched to the limit, it would be more than 4 meters long. With 3 huge wings flapping at the same time, not only could it easily lift its fat body, it also allowed its flying speed to an astonishing level. With every breath of time, it could travel tens of meters through the air. Tang Huan sat cross-legged on Zhao Budian's back with the dragon and phoenix spear placed horizontally on his lap. The little girl was sitting on top of Zhao Budian's neck, holding a huge package in her arms. Every time Zhao Budian turned his head back to look, the little girl would throw him a few high-ranked gems. After eating for a whole day, the number of gems in his bag had decreased by half. Little scoundrel, I don't have any gems to eat anymore today, the little girl called out. Yeah? Hearing her words, Zhao Budian immediately turned his head to protest. If you want to continue eating, that's fine, but after you finish eating, you won't have a single high-grade gem for the next few days. The little girl shook her bag and snorted. Zhao Budian looked at Tang Huan pitifully, and seeing that he was still unmoved, he could only droop his head and shut his mouth, no longer making sounds. Seeing this, the little girl laughed complacently. Seeing the appearances of these two little fellows, Tang Huan could not help but burst out laughing. The words he had said to the old fatty last night was not a joke at all. Tang Huan had already left the Heavenly Forging City before the sun had risen. Tang Huan was very clear about the intentions of Xing Meng that the old fatty had just revealed. Not only was Xing Meng the Lord, he was also a peak stage 9 law saint who had lived for hundreds of years. Under normal circumstances, it was simply impossible for Tang Huan, the peak of the 8th step martial lord, to see him. The reason the old fatty revealed her intentions was to dispel the thought of Tang Huan going to Holy Spirit Continent to find traces of his mother. The old fatty hoped that Tang Huan could enter the Sky Spirit realm to cultivate and step into stage 9 martial saint as soon as possible. It would be best if he could reach the peak stage 9 and come out again. At that time, not only would he be safe, he would also have a very high chance of meeting Tian Clan. It was very normal for the old fatty to think this way. Unfortunately, he had miscalculated something. Because of Mu Yan, Tang Huan had planned to go to Holy Spirit Continent, and it could even be said that he was invited by Xing Meng to visit Holy Spirit Continent. Not only did the information revealed by the old fatty not achieve his original goal, it had instead made Tang Huan even more determined to go to the Holy Spirit Continent. With regards to this, The old fatty tried his best to dissuade Tang Huan from leaving. Tang Huan had no choice but to bring out a Grandmaster badge and 3 pairs of wings. The Grandmaster badge that the old man left behind had lost its ability to teleport. What Tang Huan took out was Shen Guan's piece. On the day of the weapon refining sacred assembly, Tang Huan had once found an opportunity to tell Shen Guan that he was going to the Holy Spirit continent. Seeing that Tang Huan was determined, Shen Guan did not advise him, and only gave his Grandmaster badge to Tang Huan. With the Grandmaster's badge and Zhao Budian, Tang Huan had finally passed. Regarding this trip to the Holy Spirit continent, although Qin Yang had repeatedly guaranteed that there would be no danger, according to Tang Huan's calculations, the possibility of the Tian clan attacking him was not high. However, Tang Huan also didn't want to place all his hopes on Qin Yang's promise and his own speculations. Before going to the Holy Spirit continent, Tang Huan would still go to the Bloody Flame mountain range of Fengming according to his original plan. With this 6-winged blue dragon, there was no need for Tang Huan to return to the Furious Waves city first. From there, he would head out to the Crescent City, before heading north to Fengming Mountain. After exiting the Heavenly Forging City, he continued to fly in the northeastern direction. Passing through the Ocean of Fury, he would directly reach Fengming Mountain. Time passed like flowing water, and the sky gradually darkened. "Look, we're at the beach." Suddenly, the little girl clapped her hands and cheered. Tang Huan looked down. Not far in front of him was indeed an endless ocean wave. "Let's rest here for the night and leave tomorrow morning." Tang Huan laughed. "Yeah!" Zhao Budian cried excitedly and immediately dove down. In no time, they landed on the beach with Tang Huan and the little girl. Heavenly Forging City. A fat figure paced back and forth in the shadows outside the Glory Sacred Temple. "This kid is too naive. If he really encounters danger, the Grandmaster medallion won't be of much use." Fat old man muttered in his mouth. When he looked towards the palace wall, his chubby face was filled with hesitation. "Sigh, should I go in, or not?" "FCK, it's a knife to the head, and a knife to the head to retract it. I gave it my all. At worst, I would just get beaten up." After a long while, Fat old man finally made up his mind. He climbed over the palace walls, and quickly shuttled between the continuously rising and falling palaces. Inside Glory Sacred Temple, one could occasionally see pairs and pairs of martial warriors patrolling. However, the old fatty seemed to be extremely familiar with the topography inside, constantly moving left and right, not disturbing anyone at all. Before long, the old fatty had already reached the depths of Glory Sacred Temple. He really can't do it. In front of an exquisite hall, the old fatty was bent over, holding his knees as he gasped for breath and began mumbling. "Where did this old thief come from? How dare you barge into our sacred palace?" A loud shout suddenly rang out and the door of the hall opened with a creak. A white shadow flew out like a ghost. It was a white-robed female with snow-white hair. She grabbed at the old fatty's head with her claw. Wait, Sister Shan Lan, I am Yi Chongshan." "Ah!" The old man broke out in a cold sweat and cried out again and again. But before he could finish his sentence, the white-clothed woman withdrew her hand and kicked him in the stomach, causing his fat body to fly out. "Impudent! How dare you come to the Glory Sacred Temple to try and deceive me? That Yi Chongshan is so handsome. How can he be as ugly as a pig like you?" The lady in white called Shan Lan's face darkened. Her face turned cold and she immediately pounced forward, punching and kicking fat old man. After a long while, Shan Lan stopped, looking at the old fatty who was curled up into a ball and continuously moaning. He said angrily, "Old thing, why didn't you hide?" "Sister Shan Lan, I want to hide, but I can't." The old fatty looked depressed. He raised his head and saw that his face was already bruised. When he finished speaking, he grimaced in pain. "You!" Hearing his words, Shan Lan gnashed his teeth in anger. "Old thing, you're really a pig. You don't know how to say that, just to vent for me. Why didn't you hide and let me beat you up?" "Right, fatty." The old fatty's eyes lit up and he swallowed the word grandpa back into his mouth. "Why didn't I think of that?" "You!" Hearing that, Shan Lan was so angry that he started laughing out. "Old thing, haven't you been hiding your powers well for the past few decades? Sister Shanlan, I actually have something that I need your help with. Oh wow, stop hitting, Sister Shanlan, I actually just wanted to come and see you. Chapter 447, Entering Fengming Mountain, Bloody Flame Mountain. At the bottom of the mountain, which was dyed bright red with blood, a few figures could be seen occasionally. All of them were martial warriors who were training here. Another evening, in a small cave, a man in green clothes covered in sweat lifted a huge rock in front of him. 3 jade-like gems the size of walnuts appeared in his hand. Haha, blood prison stone. The blood prison. After being stunned for a short moment, the green-clothed man actually started dancing, and laughed out loud in wild joy. But after a short moment, the young man seemed to have thought of something, and his voice abruptly stopped. Then he abruptly turned around to look, and in the next moment, his expression became somewhat unsightly. 10 meters away, 5 figures appeared. They were obviously attracted by his voice. Brothers, our luck isn't bad today. We encountered the blood prison stone the moment we arrived at Blood Flame Mountain. This, a man with triangular eyes revealed an uncontrollable joy on his face. Although the blood prison stone was only a mid-grade gem, its price was at least $1 million, comparable to a precious high-grade gem. Kid, hurry up and get lost. Otherwise, another burly man dressed in black burst out in laughter with a sinister look on his face. While they were talking, the 5 of them had already rushed over to that small hill. What's that? The green-robed man's face was unsettled. He suddenly raised his hand and pointed behind the 5 people. He had originally wanted to draw the attention of the 5 people in front of him with a casual wave of his finger and then grab the blood prison stone to escape. However, just as he finished speaking, the man in green was stunned. He stared straight at the direction he was pointing at, his eyes wide as if he had seen an extremely unbelievable scene. Kid, I have long been sick of this little trick. The triangular-eyed man laughed mockingly. Then, he noticed that there was something wrong with the green-clothed man's expression. Curious, he could not help but turn around and look, while the other 4 also turned their heads. After a moment, the 5 of them were stunned. He had 3 pairs of wings, but there was not a single feather on his body. In addition, other than having wings, which were very similar to flying beasts, his appearance was actually extremely similar to those of beasts. He had a thick hind leg, short forelimbs, a robust body, and a huge round head. What was even more unimaginable was that on the back of the blue monster, there was a man wearing black clothes and a beautiful little girl in a red dress. Yeah! With a clear and resounding clang, the blue monster swooped down from the sky and rapidly floated to the bottom of Bloody Flame Mountain. It was less than 100 meters away from them. Bloody Flame Mountain, I'm finally back. The little girl in the red dress jumped down and excitedly cheered. She looked as beautiful and adorable as a carved jade. The man in black also jumped down at almost the same time. He looked extremely young, around 20 years old or so. He had a slender figure and a handsome face, and he held a strangely shaped long spear in his hands. The spearhead was a bright red like fire, but the shaft was covered in green clothes. Heavens! Heavenly grade armament? The triangular-eyed man whispered, his face twitching slightly. Sometimes, it was easy to determine the rank of a weapon just by looking at its color. Low-level weapons were usually pure color. Medium-level weapons had 2 different colors mixed together. High-level weapons could be seen in 3 different colors, and there were 4 different colors. Most of them were heavenly grade armaments. The pike in the black-clothed man's hand had 4 colors: red, green, blue and gold. Those who carried heavenly grade armaments were mostly martial lord of the 8th stage. Even such a young martial lord of the 8th step had actually appeared on the peak of the Fengming Mountain Blood Flame. The triangular-eyed man and the other 5 held their breath, quickly exchanging glances. They were all somewhat bewildered, but then, an even more astonishing scene appeared. The blue monster's body began to shrink rapidly. In a short moment, it had become the size of a round disc. 3 pairs of wings gently flapped and it floated up, landing on the shoulder of the young man. Blue Dragon, spiritual beast Blue Dragon. Seeing this scene, The triangular-eyed man seemed to have thought of something and suddenly widened his eyes. He could not help but exclaim out loud, "What? Spiritual beast blue dragon? 6 wings. 6-winged blue dragon? Dot." However, at this time, the young man suddenly looked over. In the next moment, the triangular-eyed man and the other 4 felt an incomparable sense of oppression engulfing them. Their minds were floating, their souls were trembling, as though they were about to suffocate. In a split second, the 5 of them subconsciously shut their mouths tightly, not even daring to breathe loudly. "Let's go!" In the distance, a low shout sounded. The young man grabbed the little girl in the red dress and flew towards the top of the peak. In an instant, they had already transformed into small black dots. When his figure completely disappeared, the triangular-eyed man and the others let out a sigh of relief. They seemed to have collapsed. Thinking back to the scene just now, although they had some lingering fear in their hearts, it was soon followed by an unconcealable excitement that appeared between their brows. "Oh my God, a 6-winged blue dragon! I actually saw a 6-winged blue dragon. Who is that senior?" "He looks very young, but his actual age should be around 30 to 40 years old. Right? 8th Martial Lord. I wonder what is he doing up there? Dot." They talked back and forth without even realizing that the green-clothed man had secretly slipped away with the blood prison stone in his hand. After a long while, the triangular-eyed man suddenly laughed nervously. "Brothers, who is our guy?" "Who?" the burly man and the others asked in unison. "Tang Huan." The triangular-eyed man said the name with determination. "Think about it. Is his spear similar to the advanced weapons forged by the Phoenix Flame Essence and Dragon Crystal back then?" "It seems to be true." The few of them pondered over it and subconsciously nodded their heads. "Also, I just remembered that someone had once said that Tang Huan possesses the second-ranked spiritual beast, Blue Dragon." It was said that this news came from the Heavenly Forging City, so it shouldn't be wrong. The triangular-eyed man squinted his eyes again as he spoke with some excitement. "Looks like it's definitely Tang Huan." TSK, he became a martial lord of the 8th step so quickly? 6-winged blue dragon? It is said that all blue dragon eat gems. How many gems would they need to be fed to evolve to the 6 wings race? Didn't Tang Huan enter the Sky Spirit secret realm? When did he run out and come to the Blood Blaze Mountain? The few of them were in high spirits. Chapter 448, Phoenix Stage. Whoosh! Tang Huan's body was like a ray of light as he leaped up and down the mountain with incomparable speed. Unknowingly, he had already arrived at the middle section of Bloody Flame Mountain, and the little girl was also carried on his back. The higher they went, the hotter it became. However, for Tang Huan, who had fused with the Nirvana sacred fire and condensed the sun spirit body, this kind of heat was completely unbearable. As for the little girl, she was not affected at all. On the other hand, a golden light began to circulate around the golden horn above Zhao Budian's head, and a cool and refreshing aura spread out wave after wave. After about half a quarter of an hour, Tang Huan was only a few hundred meters away from the peak. At this point, the heat coming from the mountain peak was countless times stronger than the heat coming from the foot of the mountain. Tang Huan's forehead was already covered with beads of sweat. On top of Zhao Budian's sharp horn, the golden light was circulating even more intensely, to the point where the little girl looked to be the most relaxed. According to what the little girl had revealed, this Blood Blaze Mountain was surrounded by an incomparably tyrannical pressure. Even back then, if she wanted to reach the peak, she would have to keep flying close to the peak of the mountain. She wouldn't be able to fly directly here from a high altitude, and would have to float to the highest point of Bloody Flame Mountain. This was a pity, otherwise, there would have been no need for Zhao Budian to have landed at the bottom of the mountain range earlier. In the blink of an eye, the distance between Tang Huan and the summit was already only 200 to 300 meters. At this moment, within Tang Huan's Danshan, both the 9 Yang Divine Furnace and the 5 Colors Spiritual Pills had been revolving to their limits, and their speed did not slow at all. In just a few breaths of time, Tang Huan brought the little girl and Zhao Budian with him and rushed to the peak of Bloody Flame Mountain in one go. The peak of the mountain was quite flat, around a few dozen meters in radius. In this area, The heat seemed to have solidified. The entire summit was shrouded in a layer of red mist. That extreme heat made Tang Huan feel as if he was in a furnace, and on his shoulder, the golden brilliance that was being released from Zhao Butian's horn had already solidified, wrapping around its entire small body. No wonder it is hard for even Stage 9 rankers to reach this place. Tang Huan exhaled lightly, and could not help but exclaim out loud. This Beaks's heat wave was already extremely terrifying. Ordinary Stage 9 rankers would not be able to withstand the heat wave's assault. Even if they were peak Stage 9 rankers, it would not be easy for them to ascend to the heaven realm. Yeah, Zhao Butian nodded his head, and shouted in agreement. Of course. She then jumped down from Tang Huan's back, and while skipping, she ran towards the central area of the peak, and said, Tang Huan, quickly come over, the flame heart is right here. Tang Huan looked over, to see that at the center of the summit, there was a round jade platform. In the center of the jade platform, there was a large sculpture of a phoenix. Its entire body was a deep red like fire, and its gigantic wings were slightly spread open. It looked as if it was about to soar into the sky, and was actually very lifelike, as if it was alive. In Phoenix's mouth, there was an irregular-shaped fiery red ball. It was about the size of a fist. From afar, it looked like a heart. Flame heart? Tang Huan's eyes lit up, and immediately moved. Following that, Tang Huan's attention shifted over. A moment later, he sensed a gentle aura fluctuation that originated from the blood-red jade platform. Seemingly at the same time, the rapidly spinning nine-yang divine furnace within Tang Huan's Danshan started to tremble intensely. After a while, Tang Huan and the little girl almost arrived at the side of the jade platform at the same time, and then leapt up one after the other, quickly arriving in front of the sculpture. Little girl, how do you obtain this flame heart apostrophe? Looking at the flame heart that was almost within reach, Tang Huan's heart skipped a beat. The feeling this flame heart gave him was extremely special. The gentle aura it gave off seemed to blend perfectly with the surrounding heat. The heat from this peak was similar to that of the Nirvana sacred fire. This meant that after the flame heart entered his body, he wouldn't have to worry about it and the Nirvana sacred fire repelling each other. If you want to take out the flame heart, you must use the power of my Phoenix bloodline and your spiritual fire to activate it at the same time. At that time, the Phoenix ancestor's mouth will open, and the flame heart will naturally separate from it. The little girl looked up at the Phoenix, her bright black eyes filled with admiration. After a while, she seemed to have thought of something, and looked at Tang Huan in the blink of an eye, and said, Of course, you can try to take it off first. No need for that. I believe in you. Tang Huan smiled slightly. Alright, then let's start now. The little girl's eyes flashed, but her delicate face revealed a dazzling smile. As she finished speaking, she sat cross-legged in front of the Phoenix statue and extended her white and tender hands, pressing down on one of its claws. Tang Huan, I'll go first. When I call for you later, you can make your move. Nodded slightly. The little girl took a deep breath and slowly closed her eyes. Tang Huan sat cross-legged next to the little girl and squinted his eyes slightly. Zhao Butian also slipped down from Tang Huan's shoulder as his big eyes curiously looked at the little girl. Clang! Not long later, the little girl opened her eyes and suddenly opened her mouth. A clear and loud sonorous sound of Feng Ming's voice came out. Following that, the little girl's white and tender right palm became a deep red. Blood continued to seep out, following the phoenix claws and spreading outwards. Yeah? Zhao Butian was shocked, and uncontrollably jumped into Tang Huan's embrace. His dark blue eyes were opened wide. In just a few breaths of time, the phoenix statue had already been wrapped by the blood-red spider web like silk threads. Not only that, a large portion of the phoenix stage underneath was also covered by the blood-red silk net. Another few breaths of time passed, and the entire phoenix stage was enveloped within. However, even at such a stage, the girl's right hand was still bleeding. She didn't show any signs of stopping. Time passed bit by bit. Her delicate face had already turned slightly pale. Seeing that, Tang Huan frowned, but just as he was about to speak, the little girl raised her right hand, and called out weakly, Tang Huan, It's your turn. Alright. Tang Huan did not have time to think. He immediately extended his hand out and pressed onto the other claw of the phoenix statue. Chapter 449, Phantoms. Ho! The heat churned as incomparably vigorous spiritual fire energy immediately surged out from Tang Huan's right palm, and seeped in endlessly like a broken dam. In an instant, the phoenix sculpture's claws revealed a dazzling fiery red luster, and like a stream of water, it crazily spread through the blood-red web. Not long after, the entire phoenix statue and this section of the phoenix stage on the peak was completely enveloped by a brilliant red light. Tang Huan did not stop there. The moment he sent out the power of spiritual fire, he felt an almost irresistible force from the sucking. At this time, even if he did not actively unleash the power of the spiritual fire, the power that originated from the phoenix stage would also constantly increase. This feeling was exactly the same as when he had first opened the Phoenix Nest store. It was as if his palm and the phoenix sculpture's claws had merged into one, making it difficult to separate from each other. If he did not reach the sucking to its full strength, it would be difficult for him to stop. After a while, Tang Huan could not help but frown. This phoenix stage was like a monster that could never satiate enough. In just a short period of time, more than half of the spiritual fire's power had already been used up. The heavenly grade armaments that he forged in the Divine Weapon Pavilion for 10 consecutive days were only this much. Don't tell me you used up all of the spiritual fire's power? Tang Huan couldn't help but think of this. Of course, this was not the worst outcome. If he completely used up all the power of the spiritual fire, he still wouldn't be able to activate the Phoenix stage and take down the Flame Heart. Then he would have a headache. Tang Huan, can you still hold on? By the side, the girl's face had turned slightly better. Not bad. Tang Huan nodded slightly. The energy required to activate this Phoenix stage is enormous. Tang Huan, if the power of the spiritual fire is not enough, you can use the genuine qi. Although the effects of the genuine qi cannot compare to the power of the spiritual fire, it can still play a role. The little girl raised her head and looked at the fiery red sculpture. Alright. What the little girl said was exactly what Tang Huan was thinking. In the next moment, Tang Huan began to move, and a majestic genuine qi mixed with the power of the spiritual fire rushed into the Phoenix stage. Another long period of time passed. Clang! Suddenly, a fengming burst out from the peak of the Blood Blaze Mountain, shaking the earth. Nearby, the numerous martial warriors that had stopped their activities due to the dark of the night were all startled by this sudden commotion. One by one, they looked towards the blood-red mountain with uncontrollable shock in their eyes, while the martial warriors that were at the bottom of the mountain were even more baffled. Ho! At this moment, on the Phoenix stage at the peak of Bloody Flame Mountain, Tang Huan let out a long sigh of relief. The moment the voice came out from the belly of the mountain, his right palm had finally left the feet of the Phoenix statue. The Phoenix stage has finally been activated. Tang Huan, how are you right now? The girl jumped up with excitement in her eyes. My energy is almost depleted. Tang Huan shook his head with a smile, revealing a faint trace of exhaustion between his brows. Great. The little girl suddenly clapped her hands, looked at Tang Huan, and giggled. Tang Huan, thank you so much. You really are a good person. What do you mean? Tang Huan's face changed slightly, as if he felt that something was amiss. He stared at the little girl fiercely. Tang Huan, I have always had a wish, and that is to undergo a true rebirth to obtain the legacy of the Phoenix Grandmaster. The little girl said with a smile, unfortunately, if I want to rebirth, I'll have to activate this Phoenix stage apostrophe. But to activate the Phoenix stage apostrophe, aside from needing the Phoenix bloodline, I also need the Nirvana Sacred Fire apostrophe. I originally thought that there was no hope in this life, but I never thought that you would actually succeed in fusing with this kind of spiritual fire. With my Phoenix bloodline and your Nirvana Sacred Fire, I have finally succeeded in activating this Phoenix stage apostrophe, and my Nirvana stage will soon begin. After fusing with the Flame Heart and obtaining the legacy of the Phoenix Ancestor, not only can I recover my strength, I can even progress further than when I was at my peak. One day, I will even be able to reach the level to which this old phoenix knew of the past. Tang Huan, tell me, should I properly thank you? The little girl was extremely pleased with herself. You really should thank me. Tang Huan finally understood what was going on and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. The little girl giggled. Tang Huan, since you have been treating me pretty well during this period of time, and have even helped me successfully activate the Phoenix stage, I won't hold grudges against you for what happened that year. You can take this little scoundrel and scram. The moment the Nirvanic rebirth starts, you all will immediately be rejected by this Phoenix stage apostrophe. If you want to be like this, then you might as well take the initiative and leave. Tang Huan, what do you think? The little girl's face was full of ridicule. She no longer cared about Tang Huan at all. As for Zhao Budian, this six-winged blue dragon, she did not care at all. This little fellow could indeed fly, but its strength, haha, did it have strength? Yeah. Zhao Budian seemed to have understood something, and bared his fangs and brandished his claws at the little girl, his eyes filled with anger. I really want to see what it feels like to be rejected by the Phoenix stage. Tang Huan smiled slightly. The little girl frowned and looked at Tang Huan with suspicion. Even now, Tang Huan was still able to laugh, which was a little abnormal. Since you want to bring suffering upon yourself, then continue to stay here. With a cold laugh, the little girl quietly pulled away from Tang Huan, and then her gaze landed on the Phoenix statue. Time passed bit by bit. However, the more she waited, the uglier her face became. After about 10 breaths of time, she said frantically, "What happened? Isn't Nirvana beginning?" "Right. Why hasn't the Nirvana stage begun?" Tang Huan sat cross-legged on the ground and asked in surprise. "It's you." The little girl suddenly stared at Tang Huan in the blink of an eye and shouted fiercely, "Tang Huan, you must have done something to this Phoenix stage apostrophe." "Little girl, do you really think that I don't know what you're thinking?" Tang Huan suddenly laughed and slowly stood up, walking towards the little girl step by step. You. The little girl's expression changed drastically, panic flashed across her eyes, but she immediately calmed down again. "Tang Huan, regardless of whether or not you've really done something, the fact that you've used up all of your genuine chi and spiritual fire's energy is a fact. If you're sensible, then tell me honestly, otherwise, don't blame me for my actions." Chapter 450, Phoenix Soul Bead. "You want to fight me?" Hearing that, Tang Huan's face turned strange. "Woo, to be able to compare to the strength of a martial lord of the 8th step, I think this is your greatest reliance." Do you know that my strength has already been restored to the 8th step?" The little girl was shocked. Just as Tang Huan had said, the strength of the 8th stage was indeed her greatest reliance. She had thought that she had hidden it perfectly, but now, it had actually been revealed by Tang Huan. What was even more frightening, was that Tang Huan should have known about her secret for a long time, but had not revealed it at all. "That's right." Tang Huan laughed. The little girl's method of hiding her strength was indeed brilliant. When he had just returned from the Sky Spirit Realm, Tang Huan did not notice anything strange. He thought that she had only recovered to the 6th stage, and only after she had absorbed the power of the spiritual fire did Tang Huan begin to grow suspicious. After observing the aura fluctuations several times, he was certain that the little girl was hiding her strength. This was also because Tang Huan possessed the 9 Yang Divine Furnace and 5 Colors Spiritual Pills, so the perception ability was extremely sensitive. If it was anyone else, even someone like Shen Guan would not be able to discover the little girl's abnormality, and only thought that she was stage 6 martial master. "So what?" The little girl gritted her teeth. Behind her small body, a pair of huge fiery wings spread out. "I don't believe that you will be a match for me after you run out of energy." "Yeah?" Seeing the change in the little girl's body, Zhao Budian was completely stunned. "You can give it a try." Tang Huan smiled lightly. "Tang Huan, you asked for this yourself." The little girl let out a sharp cry as her fiery red wings suddenly flapped. The terrifying strength chi condensed into a violent and shocking storm, howling towards Tang Huan. Buzz! Almost at the same time, an intense trembling sound resounded and a dazzling red light rose from the Phoenix stage, quickly covering the little girl within. Immediately afterwards, as if she had been grabbed by a giant invisible hand, she involuntarily floated backwards, and in an instant, she had already landed below the Phoenix stage. The red light around her disappeared in an instant. However, the little girl was stupefied. She could not believe her eyes. "Little girl, how do you feel?" On the Phoenix stage, Tang Huan said while smiling. Zhao Budian's dark blue eyes also continuously blinked, extremely surprised. "How could this be? I was actually rejected by the Phoenix stage?" the little girl cried out. "Little girl, I forgot to tell you something," Tang Huan said while beaming. "When I was activating the Phoenix stage, I felt a pearl inside the sculpture. I used the genuine chi to probe it, and discovered that my own mind stigma had actually fused into it. The current me seems to be able to control this Phoenix stage apostrophe." Regarding this, Tang Huan was also rather surprised. In Tang Huan's original plan, if this flaming Phoenix King really had other plans, then it would be alright. Even if he exhausted all the power of the genuine chi and the spiritual fire, with his powerful sun spirit body, Tang Huan's strength would be comparable to the demon marshal of the 8th step. However, he never expected that during the process of activating the Phoenix stage, he would actually sense a fiery red bead inside the Phoenix's body. Just as Tang Huan had said, he had only wanted to use the genuine chi to check it out at the beginning, but unexpectedly, after the genuine chi had entered, the mind stigma had also merged into it. At that time, Tang Huan already understood that not only was the bead the core of the Phoenix stage, it also contained the legacy of an ancient phoenix. This also meant that Tang Huan, whose mind and spirit were fused with the bead, had become the owner of this Phoenix stage. However, it was clear that Tang Huan could not obtain the inheritance because he did not have the Phoenix bloodline. Phoenix Soul Pearl. That is the Phoenix Soul Pearl. The little girl was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Her head felt dizzy and she wanted to vomit blood. After a long while, she finally regained her senses, and angrily stared at Tang Huan. "Tang Huan, that Phoenix Soul Orb contained the inheritance of the ancestor. You don't have the Phoenix bloodline. It is useless to you, so why don't we make a deal? You took away the flame heart, and left the Phoenix Soul Orb, then we can consider ourselves as not owing each other anything, or else." "Otherwise what?" Tang Huan raised his eyebrows and smiled slowly. "Otherwise, you will have one more enemy with the strength of a stage 9 demon king. With my current condition, it won't be long before I completely recover my strength in this Blood Blaze Mountain. At that time, if you want to go to Holy Spirit Continent, it won't be that easy." The little girl humphed. "Are you threatening me?" Tang Huan's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. "Not a threat, but my advice." "Tang Huan, you originally wanted to obtain the Flame Heart, but after obtaining the Flame Heart, you have already achieved your goal." The little girl squeezed out a smile. "You're right." A familiar look flashed past Tang Huan's eyes as he laughed. "Little girl, deal." Seemingly at the same time as he finished speaking, Tang Huan's thoughts moved slightly. Clang! Another Feng Ming sound rang out. On the Phoenix stage, the sculpture seemed to have become a living spirit object, as it opened its mouth wide, and the flame heart that was held in its mouth immediately floated down as though it was weightless. Tang Huan's body moved and immediately grabbed it. Below the Phoenix stage, the little girl could not help but twitch her face when she saw this. "Ho!" At this time, Tang Huan didn't hesitate at all as he jumped down the Phoenix stage with Zhao Budian in tow. The moment he left the Phoenix stage, the reincarnated Phoenix statue had already floated up, and dense red light continuously surged up from the round platform. In the blink of an eye, it had already transformed into a raging blaze that engulfed the Phoenix. "Nirvana is beginning." The little girl's eyes revealed a look of ecstasy as she flapped her wings without the slightest hesitation. Her little body soared into the air and entered the flames on the Phoenix stage. "Damn it, Tang Huan, you did not disperse the mind stigma within the Phoenix Soul Orb." In the next moment, an angry scream suddenly came from the Phoenix stage. "Oh, I forgot." Beneath the Phoenix stage, Tang Huan seemed to have just remembered this matter and laughed embarrassedly. "Little girl, you can't blame me for this. It was you who were too impatient. I had to activate the Phoenix Soul Pearl before I could remove the Flame Heart, but I didn't expect that the activation of the Phoenix Soul Pearl would result in Nirvana Flame. Seriously, you didn't even ask, and just rushed up like that.